The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this broadcast or podcast without the express written consent of Spaced Out Radio or Spaced Out Radio Limited is strictly prohibited. Listener discretion is advised. Are you experienced?
Stop right there!
From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio with host Dave Scott.
They let us play with all our toys, they let us think that we're big boys, they let us make a lot of noise, but we ain't rule the world. They let us think we're Superman.
You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on iTunes and TuneIn. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
Dave, oh Dave, are you playing with Bigfoot and aliens again?
Dad, you gotta stop haunting the ghost. It's scaring them.
All right, seriously, put down the pointy sticks.
Oh, the deeper I fall.
Okay! Game on! Game on!
The password is...
All right.
Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride on Spaced Out Radio. Mr. Bumblefoot, Dave is ready for liftoff.
I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you.
Seriously, Dave? Really? Aren't you a little old for a tinfoil hat?
Hello, Toby. Bye-bye. Nephew. Bye-bye.
Please take your seat about row. We're with you. It's clear for takeoff. Start. 2, 1. Boost ignition and lift off.
I'm such a lucky guy, 'cause after all this time, it's like the deeper I go, the deeper I fall. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Tonight I am your host, Dave Scott. It's great to have you along for the ride on this Thursday, August 24th, Friday, August 25th. If you're on the East Coast or across the pond, hope you had a great day and night. We are live right here in the Great White North on top of the mountains of central British Columbia as we are here for you 7 days a week. We welcome everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of the Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live at spacedoutradio.com, Spreaker, KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, the High Plains Talk Radio Network, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Like our music, get your horns up for Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking us into tonight's show. Bumblefoot, formerly of Guns N' Roses, currently of Art of Anarchy, is the official music of Spaced Out Radio. Now, if you're a social media junkie like I am, do me a favor. Follow us on Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. On Instagram, you can follow me at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States. Tune us in on TuneIn. Download our shows and subscribe to us on iTunes. And our website is spacedoutradio.com. Now, if you want to take part in this show, you got to do me a favor. You got to sign into one of the chat rooms, either on Revolution Radio, Spreaker, the UPRN chat room, or on Facebook at the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or if you're on Twitter, just use the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. I'll get to your questions, your comments, your snark in there as well. Now, if you head to our website for $5 a month, you can become a member of the SOR Space Travelers Club. As of right now, you can go to the Spaced Out Radio store, pick up a t-shirt, posters, stickers, read the encounter online. That's where we put my blog on there. And if you've had an experience you can't explain, fill out an SOR Sightlines report. You can also catch some great videos by Tim Doyle from UFO Seekers and Leslie Mitchell Clark's Contact TV. Tonight on SOR, we pay tribute to one of the chosen leaders in the field of ufology and conspiracy, the late Jim Marrs. For more than 3 decades, Jim was one of the most coveted and down-to-earth writers when it came to the subject of UFOs and conspiracies surrounding his beloved topic of research. Jim was a pro, holding his sources tightly and never straying from the message to get the information to the public. Jim was also a prominent figure in the JFK conspiracy, and his book Crossfire was a source for Oliver Stone's film JFK. He also wrote about government conspiracies regarding aliens, 9/11, telepathy, secret societies. He began his work way long ago in the 70s as a reporter in Dallas-Fort Worth, and it went from there. He also taught at universities, at the University of Texas in regards to the assassination of JFK, and tonight, for the first 2 hours, we are going to be joined by the head of Galaxy Publishing, John Goodwin, who is not only the publisher of the New York Times best-selling author, but was also lucky enough to call Jim Marrs a friend as well. John, welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Thank you so much for doing this. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on your show tonight, and I'm very honored to be able to speak about my dear friend, Jim Marrs.
Now, we were unfortunate. We never were able to coincide with times to get Jim on the show, and Lord knows he tried, I tried. You know, he's a busy guy. It's one of those things that just, it never meshed for us. But he was such a legend in this field, and everybody talked about Jim Marrs. How did you first get to know him?
Well, it was actually a very fortuitous coincidence. He was already we had a mutual friend who said, you might be interested in Jim Marrs because he likes L. Ron Hubbard's fiction works. He's been a fan of his fiction, and I publish the fiction works of L. Ron Hubbard, and one of the books was Battlefield Earth that Jim had read when it first came out, and so he really liked that because a lot of the points brought up in Battlefield Earth align with his philosophy of things happening on planet Earth as well as on the subject of aliens. So I gave him a call, and we just hit it off, and it was great. So we flew him out to Los Angeles from his home in Texas, and we spent a couple of days together. He loved his burgers and his beer, and so we hit that off just really, really well, and just started chatting about all kinds of things. And he went over his history of how he used to read science fiction before it was the big genre that it is now. It was just at that time, he didn't even really have his own genre when he read the Pulp Fictions, and that's when he originally became familiar with Mr. Hubbard. So we talked, and we started talking then about, of course, probably a lot of people here are familiar with Alien Agenda and his rule by secrecy, then, of course, Crossfire. And so we talked a lot about his alien agenda, and we went over the whole thing, because the premise of Battlefield Earth is the golden disc on the Voyager is picked up by an alien recon, and on the golden disc it has a map going to Earth. And then he loved that. He thought that was just so rich as a topic to be able to discuss, because it's just, he said, why are we doing that? And right around the same time, it was very fortunate for us, Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking both came out saying, hey, this wasn't so smart that we sent this out there, because now it's gone into deep space. And with that happening, we have a problem of potentially being picked up. And if we're picked up and they're not friendly, then we're going to have some issues potentially. And he would go into, well, I think they've already been here. And he went through his whole researches in about how the aliens have been here already for thousands of years, and he either brought from the Bible or went earlier to that, and just had lots of different commentary about the fact that these guys did exist and they have been around here. And so if they were going to invade us, they would have already done it. So we both agree that it's not going to be in the Independence Day scenario. But he was, thinking that, well, they're around, and this booklet that I might as well say right now, he wrote, one of the last things he wrote is an Alien Invasion is Earth Prepared. He wrote for us, and we're making it available to everybody at our website, which we'll tell more about later on. But that goes through all of his researches on the various alien encounters, and the fact that, he said, well, they're not going to be doing any big, major, let's come and destroy everything. So on that, we then went into, but what are they doing now once they do come to the Earth? And he said, that's very much what I see happening right now, is just exploiting the natural resources, and heck with the local inhabitants, whether it be the animals or the wildlife, and sometimes the people too, which the big companies do. And then that took us right into the globalists. And I don't know if you've heard about his perspective on globalism, but he had nothing kind to say about that at all. So that's where he found a lot of the stuff with Battlefield Earth so in common. But he was very much, enamored with what the book was, and so we just hit it off, and we went to Alien Con, we went to Contacts in the Desert, and we did over 100 different radio shows and television shows, which given a lot of opportunities for a lot of amazing stories.
As you got to know him and you saw how real of a person he was, there wasn't much ego contributed to him. He was very highly thought of by his peers and sources alike. Were you surprised that even though he was a New York Times best-selling author and people lived on every word that he wrote, that he was able to, still remain humble in who he was, true to his own form?
Yeah, he was really funny about that too. He said, most people are rich and famous. I'm just famous. And he'd just go on a roll on that stuff, about, he said, I'm just an old boy investigative reporter, from Texas. And I just look and I just see what it is. And, if someone, were to open up the window and look out there and say, hey, I see there's a spaceship just crashed. Some people go, oh, that's poppycock. And he'd go look. Well, just go look and see, So he was, he was so sure of himself because he had everything so well documented, and he had nothing to prove to anybody because he'd just been, he'd had a success, and that was something he would have liked to have had more money. The problem that he had with what he was writing about was that those agencies which could have given him more money didn't, by the very nature of what he was writing about. So by writing books about, global conspiracies and the rule by secrecy and that type of stuff, those various agencies that could have really lent support to his projects, because a lot of the big publishing houses and stuff also have very, deep pockets from various sources. And so you're going to have, he said, they don't give me the support like, other New York Times best-selling authors get. And he was a little bit, didn't appreciate that, but he was still going to do his stuff. And he loved it when he just loved talking to people. And that's maybe one of his, in terms of being, rich, was like he loved to talk to people, and he'd just give everybody the same amount of time as if they wanted to talk to him, he'd talk to them no matter where they were from or what they were about, and that's what made him so lovable as a person. He did get his frustrations, and he had a cannon. He had a cannon by his home, and he'd get out there and he said, I'll fire my cannon. It's amazing how much frustration when that thing, that boom, he loved describing what it was like to load it and light it and shoot it off. And he said, all my tensions just go out with that thing shooting off. And that's what he used to handle his tensions. And if he was on a radio show or somebody with, who were violently opposed to him, he said, well, you're welcome to disagree. We can even agree that we're going to disagree. Let's just have a civil conversation about it. He was all about having a civil conversation.
I can totally understand with that, because this field takes a lot of heat from a lot of people out there, whether it's the political, the religious people who just do not want to believe in any of these topics that Jim wrote about. Did you receive, as part of Galaxy Publishing, a lot of heat about his writings from the public who thought he was just off his rocker with the knowledge that he had?
Actually, I didn't. And that's, there's a few people that when he'd get on the radio shows, they would disagree. But by and large, we try to make sure that, he was going to, we didn't try to do anything like any major, sometimes the morning drive can get pretty crazy. We didn't do any type of radio stuff. We just, folks like yourself, and, Coast to Coast and, After Midnight and all these various shows they would do. And we did some radio tours and TV tours that he did. And mostly because he was so well known as a New York Times best-selling author, on these shows where they didn't get into, you got one extreme where you have these guys here that just like, wow, look at his credentials there, 5 New York Times bestsellers. So what do you have to say about whatever you want to say about? And they listen to that, and you got your 1 to 2 or 3 minutes of a segment there, where they don't have people calling in on the network TV, or the shows like yourself where they did open up. A lot of times it was you're going to have people that are like very much kindred spirits. But we have 2 syndicated shows that we work with. One is Let's Just Talk, which is Christian radio, and another one called CSC Radio Network, which is also Christian radio. We do a lot of programming with them, and on the CSC Radio Network, like 37 show syndication. They were getting calls in. They loved him. It was like awesome, and he'd state his viewpoint about the Old Testament, and he'd quote from it and what it was, and he didn't get challenged. He'd say, okay, he was just, it was great. It was really good, and the host said we want him back, and we had him scheduled again, and then we were surprised when he passed, a week before he passed away. We spoke to his wife, Carol, who said, yeah, he's getting a bit better, so maybe 2 weeks we'll be ready to start doing radio shows again. So we started booking him. And then we got a call a week later saying he just died of a heart attack this morning. It was like, wow, none of us saw that coming. So now he was so easily able to just talk with it. He was very matter-of-fact and so easygoing. You can think what you want to think, but I just, I did my research on it, and if you did your research, then okay, but I did my research, and it sure sounds like a spaceship when he says this and with Ezekiel and this, and they just, what are they going to do? They just kind of go, okay.
John, a lot of people, as you mentioned, in different publishing companies said no to the topics that he would write up. Maybe they were afraid of what the backlash would be. Maybe they just didn't want to go into that genre. Why did Galaxy Publishing want to take a step into the conspiratorial side of what Jim Marrs was able to find out?
Well, in part because a lot of the stuff that the author L. Ron Hubbard wrote about had very similar things, like what he would write about on some of the things that Jim had found conspiratorially, not necessarily who killed JFK, but on the subject of most of the globalists, the world bankers. Jim wrote a lot about the vaccines, on the drugging of America, the dumbing down of America, these types of things, the psychiatric abuses, which then lead to further erosion of liberty and life. So there's very commonality, very much similarity in what researches and writings were, which is what Battlefield Earth and a later book that Mr. Hubbard wrote called Mission Earth very much get into. And so Jim was just like, he just thought that was so rich. He just was like, here's someone else who's another big name who can, who's definitely taking heat for expressing his views. And so Jim, did his own research and found that, he was subject himself to the whole fake news, and saw that was what was happening also with L. Ron Hubbard because of what he actually researched and did. So it was very easy to work with him, and we were able to support him because it wasn't something new to us. It was definitely not something new to me. So if someone had a problem, someone said, well, let me handle that, Jim. He said, no, I want to do this, because we both enjoy having those discussions with people that are so that really get into fake news and become, the one valued logic. Maybe that's a concept that makes sense to you. Like there is only one way, whatever that way is. It can be the one valued logic of, Allah or Moses or whoever, or it could be the one valued logic of the earth is flat. It's the center of the universe. It's all those one valued logics, which Jim was constantly trying to dispel and help educate people to just open your eyes and look. So there's a very big commonality between him and L. Ron Hubbard in that respect. So we hit it off really well, and questions that would come up, like I said, I enjoyed answering as much as Jim did.
Now, we got to know, and this may sound like a silly question, but I've already had a couple of people ask this in our chat rooms already, John. Was the last name Mars his true last name, or was it just a pen name because of the subjects that he wrote about? Because if it's a real last name, that is way too coincidental.
It was way cool. And that's a question you got to ask quite often. His name really is Marrs, but it's two R's, not one. And he would speculate all kinds of stuff. Yeah, I said it. He would just say, yeah, it's pretty fun. That I'm doing what I'm doing. And my last name, it works pretty good. And he, with his little southern drawl on his stuff, he was very proud of his last name, but it really was his last name.
And the second question coming up a couple of times already, we want to pay respect and, be respectful for the man in his passing. But a gentleman who had the sources and had the knowledge and was a little controversial with what he was writing, was it natural causes that he passed away from? Or was it maybe something a little bit more sinister, shall we say?
Once you get into that, when you start getting into that mindset, then everything starts becoming like, it automatically puts those rose-colored glasses on where everything starts getting that way. He tried to keep himself living a little bit off the grid. He lived outside of Dallas-Fort Worth in a very, very small area. So he had he made this contraption for like keeping the, some of the different, when you had the clouds, I just went blank on the name, with the, what are they called? When the jets fly over and they leave
the chemtrails.
The chemtrails, yeah, sorry.
Yes.
The chemtrails. He created a thing so that it would diffuse the chemtrails over his area. So he was definitely involved in that stuff. I was wondering, is that one movie with Robert Redford, The Natural, he was an awesome pitcher, and he kept, I said, I just wonder if that was happening, if somebody did that to him, just to kind of slowly take him out, because he was a little bit too vocal, he was too much respected, too much had the facts and figures straight, that we just don't need this nuisance that's getting in the way of our buying up all the natural water resources in South America, or, the various other things that he would write about. And there's no evidence that I've heard of that. Nobody's done that. I know he had various ailments over the years, and when he came out to LA, we'd take him to various specialists that would help on nutrition, nutrition specialists, just to help on his diet. And he definitely had had to go on dialysis near the end, so he had his kidney problem there, which wasn't a new problem that he'd had. So to answer that question, if I really got into being a conspiracy theorist, I say, well, I don't want to rule it out, like what Elon Musk said when his spaceship blew up. I'm not going to rule out alien spaceships. But there's nothing that I've heard, and Carol, his wife, has made no mention of it, and Jim never even made comments of that either. A lot of the food, Carol, the last several years, Carol was cooking a lot of the food when he was home, out of their own garden if they grew everything. So there's nothing that I've cross-flowed on that at all. Nothing that he originated, like I think somebody's trying to get. That never came up in any conversations.
Talk about Jim's passing, because you mentioned that you talked to his wife Carol a week before, and he said he was getting better, but on August 2nd he had a heart attack. How much of a shock was that for you and the rest of Galaxy Publishing to find that out, because he was your number one writer?
Yeah, no, it was a definite shock for us. It was for us, he became such a good friend, so irrespective of the business side of the deal, just, when you have like a really, really close friend, you've shared all your stories with, and you've told your various experiences, and for him, he had some of his, we were helping him on some of his physical things. So we were very just open and matter of fact with each other. And so he'd say, yeah, I can do this. No, I can't do that. And just with, like I said, a week before saying, okay, 2 weeks we're good. And then to have that happen was quite a shock, and it was very, very upsetting. Secondarily because of his being an author, but primarily because he was just, when you lose a good friend, that's just rough, just all the things we're planning to do. Had been planning to go to do Contact in the Desert, and then he had to postpone that because the doctor said, okay, just stay at home, just fully recuperate. So he didn't go to that. But we were, there was another alien con that he was going to go to. We had, we're planning lots of fun stuff to be done, and to have that just swept out, it's definitely not an easy thing to take, So, and also, I've talked to a lot of people on who have been friends with him and just helped provide some more information than I had, and just the fact that I was did so many things with him this last year, and just to be able to share some of his experiences and just his attitude about life. And he just loved life, and he really wanted people to just open their eyes. And like I said, I mentioned earlier, the one valued logic, like, my way is the right way. And he would get on these shows, especially got into politics. He'd have his viewpoint that he wasn't so much for Trump, he was just definitely against Hillary, because she was representing the globalists, and from what he saw. So he'd get onto radio shows with somebody else, and somebody would be so pro-Hillary, and he'd be so anti-Hillary, and they just, they go at it, but it was all amicable. They were just like, I give my viewpoint, you give your viewpoint, and that's something that he did, and it's not done anymore. You don't get that anymore, and people can't just have a discussion and discuss out the stuff if you don't. Like, I'm here in Hollywood, so I definitely, if I don't say just the right thing politically here, which is very much very Democrat, then it's not just a matter of, okay, it's my opinion, then I'm just wrong. And that's not something that he could, he said, that's not the way it's supposed to be. And that really was his perspective on it. You can, whatever you believe, that's fine, as long as we can discuss it. That's why this is America. He was so pro-America the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence that's brought it about, the Bill of Rights. That was totally what he was all about.
It's hard considering the political times that everyone is in. We don't try and talk a lot of politics here, but he did try to bring the whole effort into perspective for people. Yet he seemed to fall a little bit silent because there are a lot of people out there who have already made their affiliations, whether it's Republican, Libertarian, or Democrat. Up here in Canada, doesn't really matter. We get affected by no matter what happens down there. That's what happens when we're the upstairs neighbor, right?
Right.
You build a wall in Mexico, we put up a line of shrubs in Canada, kind of thing on the border, right?
Exactly, and then apologize if you scratch your finger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the whole point that I'm saying is, was he a little disappointed in the fact that maybe his message politically didn't get out as much as he would have liked?
It wasn't so much the politics of it. It was the thing that he was most disheartened about was that people were no longer talking to each other. And you'll see that when you see, like, every day New York Times posts something vile about Trump. It's just there. They do it every day. LA Times does that. And then you find other papers which do nothing but say great things about Trump. But there's no discussion. There's no more like, okay, good, so let's talk about these various issues. Like there's the big issue that happened last week, which got totally blown out of proportion, and it became an international affair with that. The whole thing now over the Confederate statues and this whole thing of like it's totally politically incorrect. So the whole thing of what's politically correct and incorrect, it's unfortunate now because then people, because they're not, because he very much was into, well, you have to study and look at the scene and develop your own opinion, and people don't do that. They'll take some of that and just like go by what seems to be the right thing to think, and there's no actual process. It's just a straight, I'm going to adopt this perspective, and because of that, since there's no thinking getting there, as soon as you challenge that, the only thing they can do is refute, because they have no process that led them to that conclusion. There's a lot of people that voted for Hillary did it because I'm a Democrat and I'm voting Democrat. And people that voted for Trump, likewise. There wasn't a lot of thought that went into it. So when someone challenges it, there's definitely no thought in the rebuking of it. And that was his biggest, what he was hoping to be able to make some type of an impression on, like, whatever you want to do, guys, just look and just think of, reason why you're thinking what you're thinking and not just react. And if you talk to somebody and actually listen to him, you might learn something. And that's, he had his sing-song voice yet again too. When you get into that part there, you just go up, you might even learn something. His voice would go up on that point, which we thought would just be just so dandy for people to learn. So that was his senior thing, I think, more than saying that Republican or Democrat, it wasn't so much the issue as it was maintaining the American liberty. He was very pro-American, and I know, from Canada that, various places, because I've done shows from the East Coast over here to the West Coast, and there's different, when you go into Toronto, it's a very definite, seems to be more liberal than it is in some of the other areas on the West. And so it's just similar to over here in the United States, So he just really wanted to see people talk to each other, and he really believed in what the United States stood for, and the Declaration of, what happened when it first started in 1776, and in the Bill of Rights, which he lived his life over, just based upon all of his researches that he did, and he saw them being whittled away, which is one of his big things with 9/11, assassination of Kennedy. All these things were like the whittling away of our freedoms and rights in the name of whatever the name was that was touted at that point, but they all ended up with less celebrity for individuals. So he was against that, and that's what he was really wanted to get across to people.
John, at any time as a publisher, because in the end, when he's about to write a book or comes up with a topic, he's going to have a discussion with you. Were there any topics that were off limits to him regarding these conspiracies, or did you have such trust in Jim that you just let him freely go wherever he felt because you knew it was going to be the best information that he could possibly find?
Now, he went through various publishers, and different publishers had different constraints to put on him. I know the last book, I think, is with Random House, another book. The one that we've got here that we're offering was through us, and I just said, Jim, I trust you implicitly, write what you're going to write, and that's what he would do. The other one, because it got into globalists and things that they were doing to manipulate and control the world population, they were like, you really got to document this, Jim. You really got to document this. And that was being challenged a whole lot because obviously there's got a lot of toes there being stepped on. And even though the books would come out and sell really well, they wanted to make sure that they were covered. For myself, and what I did on his stuff here, it was I already knew what he was going to say because we'd done so many radio shows, so many different media, and just had so many conversations. Said, okay, you put it together, you give it to me, because I want something that we can give to the people at the conventions that we attend, because people wanted more from Jim Marrs. Okay, we want to hear from him, and he couldn't talk enough. So we wanted to do a book on this, and so that's what he wrote, and that's what we published, and that's what we have now on the website. I'll just say this right now, galaxypress.com. If you go on there, on the home page, it's on the left-hand side. It's a PDF. You can download it for free. You don't have to give us your email or anything. You can have it, and this is what we're doing to let everybody know, have something that was from Jim that he wanted to share with everybody, and he was really proud of it. And I just know how much he really loved books, and it was like so important to him that somebody wanted one of his books. He just was always, no matter the fact he had 5 New York Times bestsellers, that someone wanted one of his books and he'd see his books being sold. He would just be so tickled on that. So this is a gift to anybody and everybody that wants to download it.
Did you like the alien talk? Was that something up your alley, or did it take you a while personally, John, to warm up to topics like aliens or the conspiracy of 9/11 or vaccinations? No, I'm definitely no problem with that on that at all. I've done enough, and I've been around enough, and I've seen enough, and because I myself, I don't take drugs or medicate. I'll go to a doctor if I'm sick, but I'm hardly ever sick. And if I need something, but the fact is, you hardly ever really need something. It's more if you just take care of yourself. A lot of times, that's just probably the best thing you can do. Is a lot of times today's modern solutions become tomorrow's problems. So the idea of aliens, UFOs, I've seen this stuff and I've read it over for the years too, and I just look at it and go, just from my own experience in science and math, just seeing what it was before, even back with the Catholic Church, with like Galileo, just certain things that were just automatically, no, that's just not the way it is. And then it took a while for science to finally be able to change it so that people could see, oh, wow, we really aren't the center of the universe, and Earth really isn't flat. And, there really is blood going, the various things that are dogmatically rejected that turn out to be false, we're still going through that. We're going to keep on going through that. So we have various things right now, just straight mathematically, to me, it's impossible that in our Milky Way galaxy, of which there are billions of stars, and then you've got billions of galaxies, it's like to say that we're the only sentient race
I couldn't even think of the word to say how stupid that is. To think that and just to be that insular of a mindset. But we're dealing with that here. So I just, when I was able to talk with him about it, and to others who look at it and go, yeah, it just makes sense. And then you see the various reports, and I've talked to various astronauts, and just, of course, it exists there. And it's like, it's a good thing, but how it's going to evolve, I don't know. But it doesn't mean, just because I don't know how it's going to evolve doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And the whole fact of, vaccines and drugs and medicines and have to do this. And in California, it's a law that your kids have to be vaccinated, which I think is like, I personally think that's very wrong. So do a lot of other parents, but it's now a law here. So when I was able to talk to Jim about that, it was, a very easy point we could share with. The whole thing that he'd get into when we start talking about Hillary, like, selling a lot of the uranium rights to Russia, but that gets all swept under the carpet. Clinton's buying a lot of the aquifer there in South America, a big part of it, which was the last part of the pure water. It's just, this stuff that doesn't get reported on by the media, but yet that's going on. It's that Jim would research it, but the big media that's owned by the big globalists aren't going to let certain material out there. So I've seen it, and it makes sense to me, the stuff. So I was able to talk to him about it, and when I talk to other people on radio shows about it, it's very easy for me to of course that makes sense. Some of the stuff obviously is going to be fabricated, when people come on, because I have a lot of people that post on my social media that say stuff that's like, it takes it way far out there, which makes it easy for the mainstream to poo-poo it. But that's all I see that as. So there was a long answer to that question.
Was there ever a story, and I'm going to look for another long answer here, but was there ever a story that Jim told you, John, that just stuck with you? Maybe it was something he published, maybe it was something that he didn't, but it was just a story that sounded way too sci-fi to be real?
Well, it was, he'd get into the space fleet. So I'd go like, all right, that seems, I haven't heard anything about that. So he talked about the whole, the totally top secret where all these billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, where are these going on the budget that things don't get, they don't match, like where'd this money go and they can't be accounted for. And he then started talking about the space fleet that's being built. I've not seen anything on that, so that was a little bit hard for me to kind of go, all right, maybe it's never come in as something other than his origination to me. I've never heard that any otherwise. If it is going on and it exists out there, then the next question would be like, why, and what's the ultimate purpose of that? If we're going to go into James Bond and it's going to use that to be able to destroy China or something like that, then that gets to the whole new thing there. But it's that's something that he got into about this big space fleet that was being built that seemed a bit something I wasn't totally prepared for when he started talking about that.
Did any of the topics surprise you, though? I mean, you mentioned that the space fleet kind of made you uncomfortable with that. Did anything else make you uncomfortable? Or did you just say, okay, the reins are off, go for it?
Yeah, well, he didn't put that in his book that he gave to me. He went into, in the booklet, this one here, he cited facts that he had, and he had a lot of documents on, because this stuff you definitely have the documentation on where, like when he went into UFOs, he goes into, in 1952, in the wake of an epidemic of UFO sightings, both in the USA and other nations, including several craft overflying Washington, D.C., the U.S. Air Force issued orders to shoot down any UFO encountered if it was ordered to land but failed to do so. Fighter pilots went up on the hunt for flying saucers with disastrous results. there was a rash of crashes with perhaps up to 10 fighters lost in one incident over the Atlantic. In June and July of 52, 94 fighter jets were lost worldwide, with 51 crewmen confirmed killed. Planes were falling to the ground 2 and 3 times in some cases. According to the New York Times, 192 aircraft vanished or crashed during the years 51 and 56. The crashes ceased when the shoot-down orders were rescinded. Pilots were told to simply report any UFO incident initially to the respective commanders or airline, but ultimately such reports only went straight to Washington. Some have speculated this was a short-lived war with UFOs. So that's in one of the sections, one of the booklet in this booklet that they can download. So on that, when he went into that stuff there, I didn't have the, all he had was the citations for that. But having discussed with him so many different things that we did do, then I just took that on for what he said, and it made sense to me that could have happened. Because again, I've talked with because of another program that I have called Writers of the Future, which is for speculative science fiction and fantasy writers. We have an event every year, and quite often we have astronauts that speak. And so I've had various astronauts that talked about their own experiences, which they can't officially say, but that also supports the fact of UFOs.
Mm-hmm. Did you believe in little green men when he was saying all of this kind of stuff? Did you believe in these alien grays or reptilians? How hard was that to swallow? Because you're coming at this on a business perspective. What is going to make the company money? And here he is saying, do you know people are seeing these large black-eyed, gray-headed beings in their bedrooms and all sorts of stuff? I mean, at some point, John, you had to scratch your head and say, really, Jim? Really?
Well, I'm not so, again, if I'm going to assume that there are, if I'm going to agree to the fact or give credit to the fact that there are UFOs and aliens, to think that they're going to look like me is, what's that based on? That's based on nothing of any valid merit. It's just like, that would just be a wish that, they look like me. We all came from the same mold. But one thing that did surprise me one time because I wasn't thinking that wasn't my mindset, when someone started asking him about the different types of aliens, and he going, are you talking about this? Are you talking about that? And he'd just go like, bam, 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 bam. I was like, wow, there's so many things that he was so knowledgeable about, and some of the stuff are things that I was very much cognizant of, and some of the stuff was just like, wow, that's different. So from the business side of it, that's not something that is going to make me, a better marketer today, or a better PR, or a better, editor. But it is something that, that was part of that whole package. That was Jim Mars. But it's also what he was saying was that's part of the package that is UFOlogy that gets into that whole topic. Well, then what are they? What do they look like? Where do they, where they come from? What are the types of spaceships are they have? There's all kinds of pictures of them, so that implies, if the pictures are all correct, that they're going to be different species, different races. So that makes, it makes sense, but now we're into the realm of speculation. So in there, for me to say no to your yes is like, what's my no based on? No more than your yes. Unless you were privy to any pictures of any of the crash sites, for example, which I wasn't. I don't know that he was, so that would make it different, but I definitely was not. And so on that, it's just a matter of I love listening to him talk. So he could just talk on, and some of the stuff I kind of go, wow, okay, that's a new thing, and some of the stuff I felt a bit more on solid ground.
We are talking with John Goodwin tonight. He is the head of Galaxy Publishing, discussing his good friend and writer in Galaxy, Jim Mars, the late Jim Mars, who passed away on August 2nd of this year from a heart attack. Now, one of the things that I liked about Jim was that he had a very candid demeanor talking about these topics. He could talk to somebody who was a government representative the same way he could talk to someone who bought his book and was asking for an autograph.
That's exactly right.
How did he go about treating people that way? Like, was he very accessible to the public, or did he just try and shy away? Because, you know, I mean, a person in his position with what he is writing about, John, you know, has to be careful whom he's around.
Well, he was, he was getting up in his years, for one, so he was, there were some times there he would do 20 hours of radio shows in a week, you know, and then sometimes, okay, I got to get going on my book, so I want to have to go radio silent here for a couple weeks to do some stuff, and then, okay, now I'm good again, I can do a little bit. So he truly liked people, and because he was so comfortable with himself, he was, and he's also weathered a fair number of storms just in terms of having these various discussions with the government people you're mentioning there. Oliver Stone, you know, just when he met with Oliver Stone on doing his movie on JFK, Oliver Stone had his own research done, and just and then after he finished his whole research, then Jim talked to me and said, "Well, what'd you think?" He says, "I'm doing your book." You know, it was just like it totally bore out with what Jim had researched, but he's so used to being scrutinized, but he himself, because he was an investigative reporter, he himself scrutinized. And so he didn't have a problem with that mentality of really wanting to check your facts. And so he was constantly into fact checking as best as possible. You know, because we start getting some of the stuff here on you know, the grays and the different types of alien bodies, then you're getting into whatever exists as research and published documentation, and the credibility of that has to be then worked over, which he would do. But it was with him, he just really enjoyed talking to people. And he'd go, when we went to San Jose for Alien Con, his was the biggest panel. He was there with George Tsoukalos and with Jim Norrie and a few others, and people just want to talk to him and just find out, what about this, what about that? And he'd have his opinions, and he'd say different things, and people would listen, and he'd be challenged. Okay, well, that's fine, but realize, and then he'd have another fact that would refute something that they were saying, or he would just say, yeah, I know that thing, but the person who said that was actually talking about something else, and he wasn't talking about that, because he knew all these things. He was so thoroughly familiar with it that he could carry on a conversation and not be tripped up or surprised with somebody's origination, because he's just been there, done that. He's been doing it for so long that there wasn't something that somebody could surprise him with. And he was always, because he had his feeder lines, he'd hear about stuff as breaking news. So when someone else would try to surprise him, yeah, I heard about that last week, and it's blah, blah, blah. And it's actually, I talked to, and he'd go on, and it was like amazing. He had his sources, but he was himself so well established with what he knew that he didn't take it as a personal affront. He just thought something was challenging him. So then he would say, okay, well, I got this, this, and this. And ultimately, if the guy didn't want to agree with it, he'd say, okay, well, we can agree to disagree. And he'd just be very easygoing like that.
Was there a topic that you wanted him to write on that maybe just didn't get the chance to do so now?
No, what I wanted to write about was the book that he did, and it was great, because that was the thing that, at least the places that we went to in the radio shows that he did, that was what people were most interested in. And of course, you get into the stuff of the conspiracy of the globalists, and then you get into like that wasn't as comfortable for a lot of people. He was very comfortable with it, but other people was like, can we talk about this? Is this okay? You know, where when you get into conspiracy, period, people get into like, what if they hear me? What about this? Am I going to get, marked or something like that? So it was very comfortable, and that was something that I really wanted, because it was something that there's enough evidence out there that if people just look at something as maybe as a chronology, that they go, okay, well, maybe there's something to that, which is what this booklet does. It kind of like gives a bit of a sequence. You can look and go, okay, well, maybe there is something to this. So that's why I really like this, because it's something that the existing believer is going to go, okay, good. It more validates that perspective, and someone who doesn't have that perspective of that alien life exists or that there's UFOs can read this and go, well, okay, if that's the case and that's the case, then maybe there is something to that. So this is what I like about this booklet, and it just accomplishes that with some of his. I mean, he's got a great writing style. It's just very smooth flowing, and he's fun to read. So that's why I'm glad he was able to do that, for me, because it's a question that got asked so many times, and also, how does Battlefield Earth tie in? Why are you doing Battlefield Earth? And so he's able to do this to explain how that was, while giving his chronology of aliens and the spaceships and stuff on Earth. He then also would tie in how it would relate there, which makes it a fun thing. And what's really good about this story, Battlefield Earth, which also aligns to Jim's perspective.
On that note, we're going to hop out for our first break of the night. John Goodwin from Galaxy Publishing is our guest tonight. He's going to be with us one more hour talking about the life and the talent that was the late Jim Marrs, who passed away on August 2nd from a heart attack, a big void to fill in the field of ufology and conspiracy. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back right after this.
365 days a year, we're in the field, investigating UFO sightings, talking to alien abductees, and visiting secret military locations like Area 51. We're UFO Seekers, official partner of Spaced Out Radio. Follow our daily search for the truth at ufoseekers.com or like us on social media. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
From coast to coast to coast, Blacklight Uncharted is taking on the paranormal across Canada. From ghostly hauntings to the UFOs flying above in conjunction with MUFON Canada, we're closely investigating what's going on in the northern skies and checking out the apparitions that walk among us. Check out our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com. We want to know your thoughts, we want to hear your experiences, and we want you to share your stories. The answers are out there, and we intend to find them.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
It's paranormal news at its finest. Welcome to The Encounter. At spacedoutradio.com, The Encounter online is SOR's trusted news source for everything weird and strange going on around the world. This is news editor Eric Markham. Our team of journalists are scouring the planet for those strange stories that rarely make the mainstream. No fear-mongering or fake news here. Head over to spacedoutradio.com and encounter The Encounter.
Want to learn more about aliens, cover-ups, conspiracies, cryptids, and the paranormal? All you have to do is tune in S4 as we take over the Spaced Out Radio night, starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, each and every Saturday night, right after Spaced Out Saturdays. Hi there, this is Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. Join me, Corey Ruiz, and friends as we discuss the hot topics of the night. It's fun, entertaining, and as dark as the night. Find us at spacedoutradio.com.
Hey, this is Canadian Paranormal Investigator Mike Moore. The third Wednesday of every month, I'll be teaming up with Dave Scott to bring you Ghosts of the Great White North. Each month, we will bring on guests from across Canada to discuss their ghostly encounters. Canada is a paranormal hotbed with stories you've never heard, so we're going to bring them to you. So get comfy on your Chesterfield, grab a donut, and join us, eh?
Are you an experiencer? Have you had run-ins with strange creatures you can't explain? ETs, Dogman, Bigfoot, werewolves? They're enough to scare the daylights out of anyone. Hi there, I'm Butch Witkowski from your 4-Cop. And on the last Monday of every month, you can listen to me and the host, Dave Scott, talk about the weird and the strange being reported on Spaced Out Radio. I'm going to bring my investigations and sources, you bring your experiences, and we'll figure out the rest together. Strange Days on Spaced Out Radio. Come tune us in at spacedoutradio.com.
Want a place to share your experiences without feeling judged? We have the place for you. If you've experienced sightings or contact with ETs, ghosts, cryptids, or UFOs, and you'd like someone to confidentially look into the matter, just fill out an SOR Sightlines report. Our goal is to help you get the answers you need to the experiences you've had with our professional team of researchers. Your information stays 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines report. Fill out your experience today only at spacedoutradio.com.
Psychic Sundays, spiritual communication, ET contact, Sasquatch in your backyard. We will have it all on Cosmic Passport with me, Elizabeth Anglin. Each Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, at spacedoutradio.com, I will take you on a journey of enlightenment. The goal is learning from the soul on out. We'd love it if you joined our experience. Cosmic Passport, heard Sundays at spacedoutradio.com.
Are you interested in advertising on Spaced Out Radio? Head to our website at spacedoutradio.com and click on our advertising tab. There, you will find an assortment of ways you can get your product out there with us, from radio commercials to banners and social media. Have a product you like our hosts to endorse? We can do that too. Visit spacedoutradio.com for more details.
From British Columbia to Northern California, Pacific North Weird has Cascadia covered. Check out our feature videos at spacedoutradio.com, where I, Vincent Zunza, and my super sleuth partner Alexandra Sullivan track down the weird and strange stories from around the Pacific Northwest, from Bigfoot to Mel's Hole and everything in between. This is what makes life exciting. So why report the normal when we can report the Pacific North Weird right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
Welcome to Spaced Out Saturdays with me, Dave Cruz from Beyond the Strange. Our weekly feature on spacedoutradio.com will take you around the world discussing everything from the paranormal to the latest conspiracies from the top guests in their fields. We won't leave any story uncovered. Spaced Out Saturdays at spacedoutradio.com starting 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. And hit us up on Twitter using the hashtag SpacedOutRadio. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Welcome back to the second hour of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, I am your host, Dave Scott. Great to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, it's our final Friday of the month around here, which means it's the SOR Roundtable. I'm going to grab some friends. We're going to hang out, maybe crack a cold one, and talk about all the paranormal topics of the month of August. We got a lot to talk about, so I hope you join us at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. We are also live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas. And if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Quadrag Interim. Quadrag Interim is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets a password each and every night right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to follow us on social media, you could do so on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with me live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. Follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio in the United States, TalkStream Live, TuneIn, and you can download and subscribe to our channel on iTunes, Spaced Out Radio, if you want to grab the show as well for your podcasts. Now, our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including joining the SOR Space Travelers Club for $5 a month, rock out to some Bumblefoot. You can also read up on the encounter online, shop at our Spaced Out Radio store, watch Contact TV or UFO Seekers videos, and so much more. Everything at spacedoutradio.com. For the next hour, we're going to be talking to John Goodwin. We're talking about the life and times of Jim Marrs, who passed away on August 2nd. Jim was one of the most influential voices when it came to conspiracy and UFOs. John, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
We're going to start off with a simple question here, but I think it has a lot of merit. And that would be, how big of a loss is this in this field of research to have Jim Marrs pass away?
Well, I think it's, as we were talking a little bit earlier today, I think people don't realize to what degree it is a loss. We've got a society now which is getting more and more, like the Jim school of let's look and research. They're getting older. You got 50, 60, 70-year-olds and even older is that school of research. And a lot of the younger, quote-unquote, researchers are as adventurous as Googling the topic, or going to Wikipedia, and that's their research. And it's unfortunate because it dumbs it down to the lowest common, denominator. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more as people like Jim and that, you've got the cutting of budgets. We talked about that a bit earlier tonight too, on as the media gets less and less willing to pay for in-depth research. I just need the article now. I just need this now. So some of the stuff it's easier to do the quickie, and so sometimes you'll see the newspaper reporters, and that's what the newspaper article comes out of, that's what the TV does, or vice versa. There isn't the big research that's being done, and it's unfortunate because then people who believe that what they're getting from the media is correct are going to be misinformed, and we're seeing that very much right now with the fake news that has just exploded over the last, maybe year or so. And so with that type of a person who just took the time to research and say what he saw, and have no compunction about saying what he saw, and if it's something that he said was incorrect, and he would stand corrected. He didn't feel like he had to be right. He just researched and he said what he saw. So with that being gone as the mainstay, I think we're going to be experiencing more and more of a problem of people accepting just what they're told, and what they're being told isn't been researched. It's just what's been dictated. And that's, like I said, that's the world we're into right now of the fake news. That was totally foreign to Jim.
I understand that. And the biggest issue, then, we've discussed this ad nauseum here on this show, is the fact that so many people today, whether they call themselves researchers, scientists, or informationalists, journalists, whatever, title doesn't matter. But we see so many people today giving opinion as fact. Jim wasn't about that. He was quite opposite. in regards to that. So how hard is that to replace a guy like Jim, like you said, knowing that we have too much opinion that people are stating as fact?
It's a, boy, that's, and I imagine you've already had lots of discussion about that too on your show in the past. That's a good question, and that's a hard one because it requires someone with journalistic integrity, which if you're trying to raise a family and you have a budget you need to have in order to do that, and you either toe the line or you're tossed overboard, then that journalistic integrity will definitely take second seat, and quite possibly to towing the line and keeping that paycheck coming. And then when you have the people that are willing to investigate and do the work, and they don't get the budgets, and so then they're hampered by how much they can actually afford doing what they're doing, and that it parses it out a little bit longer than maybe it should be, and they don't have near the budget to do the research that needs to be done that Jim was able to do when that was what he was paid to do when he was an investigative reporter. He was actually paid to do these assignments and do that stuff where that doesn't get done anymore. And where people are sent on assignment, it's like, okay, good, so here's your story. I need to get some photos, or I need you to put it together to say what I need. And that's just a whole different thing. So while we do have people I think that are capable of doing what Jim did, they have to have their own, either have to be independently wealthy and still have that integrity, or they've got some type of a way of, their day job is able to keep, their avocation, which they used to make their money, is able to make their vocation work, which is their investigative reporting. So that's, I think that's what it's going to go down to. And even then, their voice is going to be, thank God there's people like yourself, where they can then have an ability to have a voice to be able to discuss this, and people that are willing to listen to somebody else instead of the mainstream media outlets.
Here's my concern with it. Who picks up the ball? Who picks up the ball to run with it? Because we've stated a few times since Jim passed away on this show that there are not a lot of accomplished researchers in their 20s, 30s, or even early to mid-40s looking into these subjects. There are very, very few, John. I mean, if you look at Jim was in his 70s when he passed. Stanton Friedman's in his 80s. Linda Moulton Howe's in her 70s. Whitley Strieber's probably in his late 60s into his 70s. We have not a lot of people who are picking up the torch, so to speak, to carry the weight of this industry and this phenomena of research into the next generation. How do we find that next one?
Well, I think we mentioned that, there's one person that I do know who I just recently met, Erica Lukes, who's younger, and we'll see how that, she pans out as carrying that torch, but she's, like you mentioned also, she's got some things that she needs to work through to get that level of acceptability that like Jim has and these other people you just mentioned. But it's I think on that it's going to be a matter of at these well, I guess fortunately, like some of these alien cons, it's a place where people can actually go and I think by the organizers and the people that do the panels on the stuff, it requires somebody seeing this as an issue that to be handled and start looking for somebody to start apprenticing, putting under your wings. And that's in other industries, that's what you do. You apprentice, the young person and get somebody there who's willing to learn, because they exist. To say that they don't exist is I'm definitely not a doomsayer by any means. But I think we need to open it up, say, look, anybody's interested in this thing, come in here and let's just talk and start grooming them up to being, challenge them on the way they think. Okay, so what do you think? Okay, so what about this? And then where they have to start thinking, and then the stuff that they thought was the right thing to think gets challenged, because these people you just mentioned, they could take both sides of a conversation and run it just as well. So they've got to groom up to be able to be that good so they can then handle any conversation on this and then look to see as things continue to evolve. Obama and Clinton both said, okay, we're going to reveal last year, the stuff that's being withheld on UFOs. Of course, it never happened, but at least they mentioned they were going to reveal whatever there was that was being withheld. So somebody that can keep that torch going and keep on pushing it to find out, okay, what is being withheld? What is the scene on this? And I think that's going to be the way to go, because these people are the ones that attend these conventions, and you can have an opportunity to see them, talk to them, and start being groomed up. I think that's a way that can be done, and that's from, again, how I would do it, just from more looking at how I handle things is if you want someone else to learn PR, you bring somebody else in that's younger that wants to learn, and they start from the beginning. Here you go. You just do the basic stuff of searching and looking, and then go out and now write a press release. Okay, then you correct it, and you start building up. Okay, now here's an interview you can do, and now you can start doing more and just build them up. So the same type of thing, I think, is a way to go with this as a solution. Maybe it's not the only solution, but it's a solution that I could see could work.
What does that next generation have to do in order to step it up, to get to that Jim Marrs type level?
Boy, he was, if you take somebody who's 25 years old, he was 50 years ahead of them. So they're going to have to, first of all, they have to read. They've got to, read what Jim and some of these other people wrote and just get that as a bit of a foundation. And not lose, because Jim always kept an open mind. So don't automatically lock yourself down. Okay, this is the way it is. Because Jim got into, his remote viewers. I'm sure, you've talked to people about that before too. He went into the whole thing in remote viewing. So they need to look this and research it for themselves and not just automatically assume that it's right or wrong, but okay, well, what is this stuff? And talk to people that claim to be able to do it, see how it's done, because Jim did that, so he was able to write and speak about it with absolute certainty because of his own experience. So for them to be able to get that, so it's going to start from them reading, first of all, what Jim wrote and the other notables in this industry, and then from there to be able to take that and look to see how that is for themselves, and then start growing on that, because that's what Jim did. Not try to splatter over everything. Maybe they're going to start, and I'm going to do something on this aspect of whether it's on UFOs or if it's on what about there in space, aliens and other civilizations in space, different things that you can actually lock into and become expert in, and then expand from there instead of becoming a little bit of everything. Just become expert in one thing and then grow from that. That's another thing too. That is how Jim expanded.
Here's one of the concerns I have in regards to this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because when I was looking at this thing, as a former reporter myself, the biggest thing that we can have as reporters, the biggest piece of weaponry we can have, if I can use that term very loosely, is our sources. And with our sources, that's where we gain information. That's where we gain the insider knowledge that we need. Now, when I was a reporter, I was a sports reporter. So for me to have an athlete in the dressing room in my back pocket that I could get information from, that was gold. That was absolute pure gold. Jim had that in the conspiracy world. He had that in the government. He had that in the military. He had that with a lot of people. What happens to all of those unknown sources now? Have they reached out to you? Have you reached out to them? Because that information had the door slammed in all of our faces in the public when Jim passed.
That's right. Now, a lot of the books, he has his citations about. He was very thorough about his citations. And so a lot of these sources, when he makes these statements, he'd quote where it came from. So that would be a very definite and valid first step to be done. It would be to go through his books. Okay, so who's he citing on this stuff here, and reaching out to him. Hey, look at So I just want to make sure that it'd be good to find someone else, because I'm not going to carry that torch of Jim. I've got I didn't do that. I worked with him, and I did well working with him. But in terms of what he did, his was a path that I was very happy that he was on, and I was able to work well with him, and it was a very good symbiotic relationship. But I think this is one of those things, to find those names, and that would be the homework assignment of the chosen one, whoever whoever can be selected as someone who's of that mindset, like yourself as a reporter from ages past when you had to. I'm assuming that still happens like that, but it's like Jim, like you said, he had his sources in spades with all these different things. So I know that when I spoke with his wife, Carol, the other day, they're going to be having his wake relatively soon, and she said he had 2 houses full of papers. He never threw anything away. It was just, she said that's what keeps her from being caught up in the loss of Jim, is because she finds these things, from 10th grade, here's a ticket to some show. It was like, why is he saving this? So she sees this stuff and laughs, but he saved everything. He had, like I said, 2 houses full of stuff. So that's something that is going to be amazing material for somebody. A lot of stuff was already donated to the local university, but it's going to be that's a very legitimate, I think what you just said there, first step to just take these sources that he cited in his books and reach out to them to reestablish lines with them newly.
So do you see, or have you, let me ask this as a 2-part question here. First part, have any of those sources reached out to you saying, who can we trust? Who can we talk to now?
They have not, but quite potentially after tonight's show that might start happening, in which case I do have some very good, close friends that Jim very much trusted as well, that would be great sources for them to at least connect up with and start rebuilding or to reconnecting that network.
Because those sources also affect Galaxy Publishing's income as well, realistically. So it's important for you guys.
Yeah. No, that's just for sure. It's yes. I'll just keep it simple like that, yes.
So I guess what I'm saying is, how do you then go about finding a writer? Because obviously you're going to want to sign that writer to continue with those sources. And would the Mars family allow you to have another writer come in and take over that information, much like when Tom Clancy passed away, which, by the way, I still think there's a conspiracy behind that. Mark Greaney took over all the files and started or continued to write Tom Clancy-style novels.
Actually, I've not had that conversation with Carol, but I think I just might be doing that just to see if there's anything else that she had that he was working on, because he just finished a book. And like I said, I think it was being published through, I'm actually not sure, it may have been Random House, but he just finished that book a few months ago. And I'm not sure that he hadn't really talked a lot about his next project that he was going to work on. I just know he had all of his confidants, and he had his network that just kept him, he was always kept in the know of what was happening on everything. So, no, that what you pose is a very legitimate concern, which I hadn't really, because I'm really focused on an upcoming release, which I thought I was going to have him help me on, which obviously I don't. So that's taking place next week in Atlanta at DragonCon. But it's something I wanted to give Carol a call on, just to see if there was something that he had confided in her that he was going to do his next project, that I could, see what to do with that.
Well, you're welcome from that idea. I will take royalties over that, by the way, just so you know.
And they will be duly paid.
Perfect.
Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The reason why, and getting back to what I was saying about sources, they're so hard to find. And they take trust, and you got to trust them, and they have to trust you. And you got to trust that they're going to give you proper information. And you hope that you have a source that's in a similar area that you can confirm that information as well. How thorough was Jim with his sources?
From what I can tell, and from talking with him, he was he had so many, he was able to cross-reference stuff. And so, in some of these people, he's like, been through tests of fire over and over again. So some of the different people that he'd been working with, and some of the places like the whole thing with JFK on Crossfire, he was there. So some of the stuff he was able to have his own experience that lended the credibility to what other people would tell him, that he'd be able to say yes or no. But because he had so many different people he was able to talk to about stuff, the wheat from the chaff would be able to be, would winnow out, and so he'd get like what distilled to be the what would appear to be the real documentations that had credibility. Because in a lot of the stuff you're dealing in areas where nobody's saying, okay, here's the picture of the person that shot, as the gun was being fired, and here's him, here's the gun, here's the smoke coming out of the gun, and there's the president. You don't have that, so you have to put that whole thing together. So because of his sources and lines and verifying different things, he was able to put together what he put together in his book Crossfire. In the Alien Agenda, that is something that all of his conversations, and a lot of it he's been very open with, because that's now when you get into the I guess any of that stuff with the aliens, with some of the stuff that's going on, like in this booklet that I was going to that we're making available to everybody on galaxypress.com. It has he talks about the remote viewers, and this was the one section he talks about on the Russian Phobos 2 was due to closely scan Mars and even land instruments on Mars' peculiar moonlet Phobos, the probe's namesake. But in January 1989, as the craft aligned with Phobos, all contact was lost. Alexander Dunev, chairman of the Russian space agency in charge of the Phobos 2, announced that the Doom probe had sent back last photos with images of a small, odd-shaped object between itself and Mars just before losing contact with Earth. There was speculation this object may have caused the craft's loss. Those losses repeated in 1993 when contact with the U.S. Mars Observer was suddenly broken. It, too, was lost just as it entered Mars' atmosphere. Military-trained psychics known as remote viewers claimed the Mars Observer also was disrupted by a small object, which they said lifted off the Martian surface and approached the craft. So he had all of his lines and stuff on the remote viewers at Contacting the Desert. He did a whole talk on that. He had a slideshow presentation, which now that I'm just talking about that, I want to make sure we get that slideshow presentation because that was really good. But he'd have this stuff, and he'd give the people that are involved with it, and these are the people who are still alive, and these are the people that are no longer with us. And so that gives the people to start connecting up with. But it's I think with what he was able to research and put together, and the people he worked with, the ones that still exist, he would use and he'd reference in his talks. So on that, it's just a matter of getting them connected up or take those sources. And what if this right now our Mr. X that we've started postulating at the beginning of this show in the first hour, that's going to be a replacement to get that person to start establishing relationships with these people so that can continue on.
Do you plan on trying to find a replacement for Jim, or is there no replacing that talent? You just have to find somebody who has a strong writing connection who could maybe take that over?
Well, I know we spoke a bit earlier today, the possibility of someone else that could, help fill his shoes. And I'm looking that over and just seeing what I've got, because working with him, it was the project I was working on was specifically that within the book that he wrote for me right now. My interest in him as part of his maintaining his legacy is to ensure that his work and what he was doing is able to persevere. And so on that, the relationships that I built with him, with probably Alien Con, some of the organizers there who really like working with him, but then also put together the panels and stuff. And I just went blank on the name of the person that organizes it, but I just met with him about a month ago. And with that, to be able to take this to the next step, what we're talking about right now, because I think it is important.
Well, I hope you do find that writer, because they are difficult to find, especially one where there's large shoes to fill. You're in for one hell of a job here.
Exactly. But I think it needs to be done, because it's the issues that he was writing about and researching aren't going to go away. And there's a lot of people. I mean, obviously, your show has been going on for quite some time, and you're what, 7 days a week?
Well, I go 5, but we do broadcast 7 days a week. Yes.
So you're 5 days a week. So there's a lot of people to talk about this topic. So I think Jim was in that rarefied upper 2 percentile of people that could really carry the conversation that other people want to be able to emulate or can quote him. So I think we need to work on building that rarefied level of personality that can do that, who's younger, so that as the existing team moves on, we got someone else that can really legitimately carry the torch and not pretentiously carry that torch. So yeah, you're right.
Do you continue with these type of topics then? Do you continue with going down this fanatical world of conspiracy that a lot of people are very crazed about? I mean, let's face it, I'm sure in your office somewhere, John, there is a tinfoil hat every time Jim wrote a book.
It's funny you say that, because the book that like I said, he's been helping us a lot to publicize, because he liked it so much and because it is an awesome book. It's called Battlefield Earth. He was rereading a 10-volume series, which we're releasing next year, that he was also going to have a blast with, called Mission Earth, and it's a satire, and it's told from the viewpoint of aliens who come to Earth, and Mission Earth is a mission to keep Earth from destroying itself. So it goes into when the main bad guys is a guy named Rocket Center, because he controls all the energy on the world, and the whole thing with the water and with the drugs and with the criminal shyster lawyers and with the governments, which are held at ransom by psychiatry, who gets the wives on drugs and uses that to blackmail. Just the whole thing, and just the big base of the enemy aliens is in Afyon, Turkey, because that's where they harvest all the opium and take it back to do just that on their home planet. So it's a whole big satire about planet Earth. And Jim was just he'd rub his hands in just like total ecstasy about being able to start talking about that one there, because that so was right up his alley on what he was being able to talk about on some of his books. So that's unfortunate, because I'm looking for someone else that can actually do that, because this really gets into the globalists are definitely targeted in this book that Mr. Hubbard wrote following Battlefield Earth, that we're about ready to re-release. And Jim was like totally grooming up for that when he was having a blast getting through the book. So I do need to find somebody.
When you are searching for a new author, because there are so many out there now, and especially self-published books, do you have to go through things with a thicker grain, with a thicker microscope to see through the writing patterns and everything? I'm curious how it works because, see, your type of writing that you deal with is much different than mine. When I was in journalism, everything I did was in 30 seconds to 40 seconds because that's as long as we had to do a report on the radio. Yet, you know, when you're writing a book and you're an author or you're writing a newspaper column, you have so many words to fill. So when you are dealing with authors now, especially who are used to the whole independent scene, how much more difficult does that make your job, or does it make it easier to try and find that replacement because there is so much talent out there now?
Well, there is a lot of talent, and I actually even have it even easier than that because I mentioned a little bit earlier about a contest that we run called Writers of the Future. And we just last April, we released volume 33. And I don't know how much you're a follower of science fiction writers, but the judges and the winners of this contest are some of the biggest names in science fiction. And because of that, it gives me access to almost any writer, established or not, for me to talk to them about this. And so now with this is opening up, I'm going to Dragon Con next on Wednesday. I'm flying to Atlanta for Dragon Con. I'm on several panels, and we have a lot of stuff that we're doing there. And one of the things I'm planning on doing is to find some writers that were going to fall in this category of Jim Mars that I can talk to, because I've got, whether I know them or not, I'm just, I'm only a few degrees away of being able to find that person. So, because I've got some really hotshot writers already that I work with who can help me then find other hotshot writers if they're not the ones that I need, which right now they're not. So I think I'm going to be in pretty good shape on finding that, someone that can actually do what Jim was doing for me. And then also, I am going to do this thing that I wasn't planning out prior to this conversation, but now that you've brought it up, and I do feel it is important enough to do this thing with probably Alien Con to try to work out setting up some type of a plan in action to find some young people that are interested in filling those shoes and start, introducing them to people that they can start getting their feet wet in this area and getting some of those sources that Jim had.
How important is it, though? Because Jim literally wore a lot of different hats, and that's no pun intended, because he was always wearing a hat. But I mean, okay, but you have to understand the aliens, the UFOs, the conspiracy and the government side, the vaccinations, 9/11, JFK. That's 6 or 7 different writers in one. You know what I'm saying?
I totally know what you're saying.
Can today's talent, John, handle that much pressure?
Not that I know of right now, but then I've not really looked. I'm sure there's going to be. I mean, it's unfortunate as everything gets more and more specialized. There's no more general practitioner on anything anymore, it would seem, including into the research specialists. Everybody has their one niche that they take. So with that, I mean, it might devolve down to needing 7 different people, but Jim didn't start. I mean, realize he had 5 decades of doing this. So he didn't start off, although, I mean, he was a reporter, a newspaper reporter that had a few lucky breaks, and then one thing led to another, and then because he did this thing in Roswell, then he met somebody else that then let him know something else about these remote viewers. That then opened up a new thing that he then learned about. So it expanded as he continued to grow, but he didn't start with all 7. So I think we're getting somebody starting off, young, that can pick whatever their point is. They start there and really become professional in that, then it's going to lead to these other directions that happened with Jim too. Just by the very nature of researching this stuff, things are interrelated. There are things that are connected to other things, and I think that's what happened with Jim. So whereas he was expert in so many different things, like I said, he had 50 years to make that happen.
Was Jim an experiencer, or did he just fall into these topics?
Now that's a question that I've been asked before. Let's see. He definitely, he was a reporter at heart, you know. So I'm thinking this thought through as I'm not just trying to be glib with this. I'm just, he's a reporter, so he always kept his objective, you know, view on stuff. So it was like he was reporting on stuff and seeing as he reported it. I mean, he was totally committed and very personal on, you know, on his family, on God, on country. For those, it was like he was one with. These other things, he was able to talk about them. You know, it was like he kept his, as close as he was, he had his distance there with them because he was a reporter. He was an investigative reporter. So he always kept that that distance so that he can just keep his objectivity. So I think that was a very, you know, astute question, because he was objective about the things they talked about. The only things he got really personal with were those 3 points that I mentioned to you.
When you have someone who is going to be the next one, or you try and build the next Jim Marrs, and personally, no offense, I think it's going to be extremely difficult to do, and I don't envy you for that challenge.
I don't even know if it's going to be possible. I just, you might need to be like in the lenses, you might need to be mentor, you know, where there's 6 or 7 different aliens that get together to become mentor, because, you know, each one has their own specialty.
No, I understand that, and I can appreciate that. You know, but do you want someone who can be an experiencer as well? Somebody who has that firsthand knowledge of what it's like to run into Bigfoot or run into an extraterrestrial, maybe an abductee, maybe someone who has UFO experience, or maybe has worked for NASA or somewhere internally in an alphabet group that is ready to take that next phase of life and come out and say, this is what we know.
I think that would be awesome if that happened. I think that the former of just getting somebody that could be objectively researching it is going to be hard enough just to say that, but to get somebody that you're saying, yeah, that's going to be extremely good fortune, I think, right now, because that's not something that I can. That's going to happen because, you know, it's you get a break. You just got to get a break to get something like that happening there. I think you can always hope for that, but I think practically speaking, it's going to be grooming somebody up who knows the you know, the right procedures and how to investigate and how to research. And then in that research, I mean, Jim, some of the stuff he did as a researcher, he then went and experienced it, but he went into it first researching it rather than he experienced it and then became then a knowledgeable on it. It went the other direction of he was researching and then somebody would take him in and show him stuff, and that's when, you know, on the stuff, some of the stuff they would do that he would talk about that he had done or observed, it was done as a result of having been a researcher, not because he was someone that had already experienced something from the war, and so now he's coming out and talking about it. It'd be great, but Jim wasn't that, and I don't know that would need to be to replicate Jim, but it'd be great. It'd be a windfall.
So when
the one thing that would be a problem though with, I do know that just by my own experience of talking with people, when you get sometimes the people that talk about having been abducted, that gets into when they start telling stories, then the believability comes in, and they tell their stories. And when you get in people telling their own personal stories, you get some people that are very plausible, and some people will make a travesty of it, so that the people that do have, you know, a legitimate story, you know, ostensibly, it makes it really hard for them to be able to be believed because of the guys that are just totally unbelievable because it's just more fairy tale than fact. So that's the problem with the person talking about some of the things, because it has such a spectrum of people talking about that subject already that it automatically starts off with you starting off on the wrong foot to open it up. Whereas if you went in strictly as an objective observer, saying, here's the facts, this is what I've seen on this, and this occasion, and here's these reports, and here's that, so this is my conclusion, that seems to be a bit more credible and easier for people to accept, and saying, well, I walked into a field and I was abducted, and I was done this and that too, and then I came back and this is my story. That's less plausible than the person in that first case I gave.
So when you're having that, and I guess there is a big concern, and I hate to use this term, but I'm going to use the term millennials. Millennials seem to, well, not all of them, but there's a lot of them out there who are coming out as journalists now, and I know this for a fact because I was just having this conversation with a radio buddy of mine in Vancouver recently, and we were having a good laugh over it. But this millennial crowd that is coming up, especially on the journalism or research side, they are very opinionated and slanted with how they review information. So instead of looking at it down the line, they are looking, down the middle, they are looking at it on one slant or the other. Is that a concern going forward with these topics, considering Galaxy Publishing has been very credible in bringing these topics to the forefront?
It is, and that's why this person we're talking about, bringing on board, is going to need to be. While he might be a millennial, there's all types of, in marketing a millennial, you got to market them so like you're helping charities. You got to market them this way and do that with them. To get into that mindset, it's so off point from what we're looking for. We need to find someone, so it's not going to be the main centerline millennial where they're, and that's the problem going in general right now with the media and with politics and with the whole thing with the fake news. You've got right, left, you've got plus, minus. It's all dichotomies. Everything's being dichotomized, so it's either good or bad, right or wrong, and there's not an ability to discuss and establish, okay, well, let's come to an understanding. It's like, okay, I'm starting with this viewpoint, and now I'm going to show how that's right. And to find somebody that's going to be, like you're saying, it'll be having to have discussions. And obviously they're out there. I know a lot of millennials that aren't the what you just said. So it's just a matter of getting communication, talking with them. There are there's your aspiring new movie producers I got here in Hollywood. Some of them are very open-minded. They're not like, okay, this is the way it has to be. They're willing to just look and just see what can be done. So there's people that can be groomed up, I think, but it's going to be, it's definitely going to be a challenge. And I definitely need to do something because, like I said, with this Mission Earth coming out, I'm going to need someone that can write and discuss and have themselves their own solid grounding so that when they talk about this, they can enhance each other.
I like Canadian Joe's comment on Twitter. He says, I honestly don't think there will be another Jim Mars. We really shouldn't expect one. And then he follows up by saying the new crop of researchers have to develop their own style. What would your comment be to that?
I agree. But what we need to have, though, is I do think we need to have, Jim Mars was Jim Mars. And he was an amazing man, and I loved him dearly. But whoever's going to be the next, I'll just, for lack of a name, the next Jim Mars, he will be his own persona. He won't be Jim Mars. But the main thing when I say Jim Mars, what I've been understanding, we've been talking about when we talk about him, is someone who's got the journalistic integrity to look and see what they see and write about it And if something doesn't make sense, to keep on investigating until they get their question answered and they feel comfortable with it, and comfortable enough that they can then carry on a conversation with someone else and not get into like the shouting match or the yaha nuh type communication that will often find itself occurring, or to resort to untruths. So that's how I'm looking at there. Someone that can be able to do that, whether it's doesn't matter, male, female. Ideally, it's going to be somebody young, so that they've got a long life ahead of them to keep on building up their bullpen and their research and their knowledge, so that they can be in 20, 30 years now what Jim Mars has been to us. But I agree with the gentleman that made that comment. We don't need a Jim Mars, but we need someone with that journalistic integrity who can do what Jim did.
Let's get to another question from hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter. This one comes from Les. He says, how much more research do you think needs to be done anyways? The brick wall has already been hit. No answers, just opinions and infotainment. Would you agree with that?
It's not necessarily. What I think is that things continue. See, as long as you keep on letting things get denied and pushed under the carpet, hidden, not known, and there's not somebody constantly pushing it, maybe right now we don't have anything that's tangible in some of these things. But if you don't have somebody continuing, if what Jim was saying is true, for example, or any of these, we'll just call them conspiracy theorists, if what they're saying is true and nobody keeps on trying to find it, then it eventually it gets pulled back, and then it's all lost. It's all been covered up, saying, well, it's just fantasy. You need to constantly keep on poking away at it until that little thing that's sticking out that, is broken off the last 50 times, all of a sudden you pull on and something comes out. And now you go, oh my gosh, here really is something here which up to this point has only been assumed or speculation that nobody's been able to say either way on. So you got to have that constantly going on. And if you don't have somebody who's going to keep on challenging the status quo, then we're going to continue seeing our liberties withered. At least I think we'll continue to see our liberties withered away with untruths that are coming our way from the major media and from the status quo, on various things that, whether it be JFK or 9/11 or CIA activities in other countries, that they say, well, this is, a story that's different than what really went down. So you need somebody that can be willing to just keep on poking around to get that data. And because they're believable and their integrity is such that informant that didn't know who to go to now has somebody they can go to and say that. Because if they don't exist, the informants have nobody to go to, because nobody would be trustworthy in order to be able to reveal something.
I got another question coming from Rahonda on Twitter at hashtag SpaceOutRadio. She says, I wonder if Jim had any idea how revered he was and still is.
I don't know if I knew he was, he definitely knew that he was loved, because I kept on telling him how much he was by all of his fans, and he liked it when he would go to the events and he'd just be mobbed. He'd have such a good time talking to the people, and he'd go to the lunch or the dinner and he'd just be constantly surrounded by people. So he knew he was loved. He was sometimes a bit mystified that love didn't have any more money connected with it than it did, because he said, he always, one of his favorite fun things was like, he talked about rich and famous, but I always, I got the famous part, but I never did quite figure out that rich part. So I think he was very wealthy, very rich in his friends, and he knew that, and that's why he just kind of, well, he went along with that, because he valued being able to get the friends a lot more than just having to get the big paychecks.
We only have a couple minutes left with you before we got to say goodnight, John, and I want to say thank you so much on behalf of all of us on Spaced Out Radio, for you coming on to talk about the life and times of Jim Marrs. I'm going to leave the forum open to you here for 2 minutes to tell us about the man you will always remember.
Well, I'll remember Jim as he was just a truly nice man, and I say I was very unfortunate because he was all set to come out with we were doing this new release that they were coming out with in about 2 weeks, and he was going to be doing all types of stuff for it, and we talked about other projects, more things he was going to be writing, and we had several radio shows lined up. I'm just, it was a loss to, I think, just the whole concept of investigative journalism that he just totally established and set as a standard that others should be able to follow. And that's, as a result of this show, I definitely want to be able to do that. I would like to just make a couple of last points on this thing here. If you go to galaxypress.com, anybody that's listening here, that last book that Jim wrote, Alien Invasion is Earth Prepared, is on there as a PDF. It's free for you to download. That was the last book that he wrote on the subject of aliens, and it's free to anybody. You don't have to leave an email. You just go there and just download it and enjoy it. It was his gift, and it's my gift to you. It does talk about a lot of his research into aliens. It talks about also past writers and books that addressed it, both fiction and nonfiction. And just one thing, if you've not read it yet, that one book that he was helping me promote, Battlefield Earth, if you've not read it, it really is a good book. It was #1 last year when he helped us re-release it, both the book and the audiobook, and a lot had to do with his helping on it. So if you haven't read it, then check it out for yourself to find out why he was so enamored with it. But otherwise, I look forward to taking my next step after now spoke on this thing, Dave, to start working on who's going to be the next person who's going to be.
John, I got to let you go there because we are up against a break. Thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight, sharing your love and admiration for the late Jim Marrs. What a pleasure, and all the best to you and Galaxy Publishing for finding the next Jim Marrs. Greatly appreciated you being with us. Thank you. Coming up in hour number 3 on Spaced Out Radio, we're going to talk more conspiracies. We're going to talk about who that next one is going to be. What do we need as people who are in this field? What do we need for that next generation of voices to speak out and to gain our trust and our faith that they're getting that proper information? You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be back with more SOR right after this.
We are getting strange on Saturday nights. Hi there, this is Dave Cruz, and each Saturday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I will take you on a tour of the weird and obtuse on Spaced Out Saturdays, from aliens to Sasquatch and every tinfoil hat in between. We got you covered. Join us at spacedoutradio.com for Spaced Out Saturdays. See you there.
Not ready for bed on Saturday night? Right after Spaced Out Saturdays, hop on over to S4 with Corey Ruiz and me, Eric Cooper from Forest Moon Paranormal. With S4, there are no limits to what we try and uncover. From government conspiracies to helping clean up the paranormal, no topic is safe on S4. We get to the heart of the matter, of the subjects you want to learn more about. So tune in on S4 starting at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern, only on spacedoutradio.com.
Have you had an experience you can't explain? Would you like someone you can trust to look into it? We have just the place. The SOR Sightlines Report is the place for you to find answers. Whether it's Bigfoot, UFOs, Dogman, ghosts, aliens, or anything strange, the Sightlines Report will get you connected with one of our expert researchers to find out what's going on. All of your personal information is kept 100% confidential. The SOR Sightlines Report, a place for you to find the answers you need. Only at spacedoutradio.com.
Hi there. I'm Butch Witkowski, lead investigator with UFOcop. On the final Monday of every month, you can listen to me and host Dave Scott on Spaced Out Radio's Strange Days. We're going to get to the heart of the matter when it comes to what's happening out there. People are seeing and experiencing things from ET contact to Bigfoot, and I want to hear about it. Your experiences are what we investigators need to help solve these unknown mysteries. So tune in at spacedoutradio.com to the final Monday of every month from Butch Witkowski's Strange Days.
This is Eric Markham, news editor for the Spaced Out Radio's The Encounter Online. We have put together a great team of writers and journalists from all over the world to bring you top-quality paranormal stories, from alien encounters to the latest conspiracies. You won't find any of that fake news here. True stories and top-notch reporting as we look to bring these experiences to the mainstream. The Encounter Online, only at spacedoutradio.com.
Do you want to know the truth? Do UFOs exist? Are aliens real? Are the governments hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO seekers, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow along with us as we journey across the United States, visiting UFO hotspots and alien hotspots, trying to document the UFO phenomenon. Catch us on Spaced Out Radio every third Monday of the month as we discuss Area 51, UFOs, and more. And also, don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.
Patrolling the Pacific Northwest, we are always on the lookout for the strange and unassuming stories that real people are experiencing. Hi, I'm Vincent Zunza from Pacific North Weird. Me and Alexandra Sullivan have teamed to bring to you those odd stories that never seem to make it into the mainstream. Stories so weird that will leave you scratching your head wondering, is this real? It's as real as it gets with Pacific North Weird. You can watch our videos right here at spacedoutradio.com.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Looking for a place to advertise at a very reasonable cost? Look no further than Spaced Out Radio. SpacedOutRadio.com has an advertising tab that you can click to check out our daily, weekly, and monthly packages to play on the radio, or our website including social media. From commercial spots to banners, we have it all. Check out our competitive pricing today.
Don't have time to listen to Spaced Out Radio live? Wherever you are, the car, the office, the shower, or even if you're traveling, we're right here for you. Each Spaced Out Radio show can be found on iTunes, TuneIn, and on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. It's the perfect way for you to catch up on our shows. For more information, just head over to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and tune in to us today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
It's Cosmic Sundays with me, Elizabeth Anglin, in Cosmic Passport. Let me take you down a 3-hour spiritual journey where we will get into everything from ET contact to Psychic Sundays. It's a journey of listening and learning together with some of the best professionals in their fields. You can tune in to Cosmic Passport at spacedoutradio.com every Sunday, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern.
The views and opinions expressed by tonight's guest and topic of discussion do not necessarily represent the official policy or position of Spaced Out Radio, Spaced Out Weekend, Spaced Out Radio Limited, its hosts, syndicated carriers, or anyone associated with this broadcast. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and hashtag Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook Spaced Out Radio Show. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Good to have you with us. Tomorrow night on the program, it's the final Friday of the month, which means it's our SOR Paranormal Roundtable. I bring in some friends, we talk about the topics of the night, and we make sure that we bring our best for you. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. We want to welcome in everyone listening in on WQEE 99 Rock the Key down in Noonan, Georgia, home of The Walking Dead. We are live as well on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and over 160 countries around the world. Great to have you with us as well. We're live on KTLK, The Fringe FM, Renegade Talk Radio out of Las Vegas, and if you're listening in on Revolution Radio, remember the Double R Machine is a donation station financed by you, the valued listener. Head on over to freedomslips.com and donate today. Bill Cardwell has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Quadrag Interim. Quadrag Interim is your password. Make sure you use it wisely, Space Travelers, as Bill sets the password each and every night, right here on the mighty SOR. Now, if you want to hang out with us, all you got to do is go onto Twitter, at Spaced Out Radio. Use the hashtag Spaced Out Radio if you want to connect with me live during the show as well. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also follow me on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can listen to us on iHeartRadio, TalkStream Live, iTunes, and tune us in on TuneIn as well. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you. And what we do there is we have our Spaced Out Radio store. We also have Contact TV, UFO Seekers if you want to catch some videos. Read up on the encounter online. Sign up for the SOR Space Travelers Club. Or rock out to some Bumblefoot. We got other features as well. Check it out today at spacedoutradio.com. For the final hour tonight, I bring in my right-hand man around SOR from the Encounter Online, Everett Thiemer. Everett, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, my friend. Appreciate you hopping on in. And I'm curious because, as you know, you were listening in the first couple of hours. John Goodwin from Galaxy Publishing was with us talking about the late Jim Mars. What kind of a hole do you think is left in our field of research when somebody with Jim's passion, desire for these topics to bring out the truth passes away?
There's a big hole, but, I mean, the one thing that he brought to the field was his credibility and his background. He started out and proved that he could be a legitimate journalist. So he dispelled, people couldn't use the argument against him that, well, he's not a writer, he doesn't have any kind of background. He got that out of the way long before he ever got into the paranormal. So I believe it leaves a big hole, but I think there are going to be people that will fill it.
I'm not too sure. Ev, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm really not too sure because he wore so many different hats. Whether it was JFK, which, really he made a name for himself. Whether it was aliens, whether it was UFOs, 9/11, vaccinations, government cover-ups, black ops, secret space program. He wore so many different hats. Can it be filled by just one person?
Maybe not, but should it be filled by one person? God of Thunder brought up a point on Twitter about that. And the idea, we maybe shouldn't be looking for, another Jim Mars. We should be looking at the talent pool that's out there and emphasizing and publicizing the ones that are talented and honest and are practicing true journalism, and let them pursue their passion and give them the credit that they're due, and let them develop into writers to go in different directions. I don't think there necessarily has to be one person to fill his shoes.
Well, it does save a publishing company a lot of money by having one person do it.
But, you know, writers, journalists aren't necessarily concerned. They shouldn't be concerned about making money for a publishing company. They should be following paths and topics and directions that they're interested in and concerned about. Once you start writing because somebody's telling you what to write about or how to write, you're really not a journalist anymore. You're just a writer.
Mm-hmm. I get that freely and wholly, but like I asked John, one of the issues that they are going to have is, A, does the family give up Jim's sources so another writer can take over? And B, do those sources want to talk to someone who could be a relative stranger to them? Because you can't just pick up the phone and say, hey, John Smith, I'm Dave Scott, I'm filling in for Jim Mars because he's passed away and I'm taking over his research. Could you and I talk so I could get some information off of you? That's not the way it works. There has to be these relationships and bonds with sources made.
Yeah, my opinion is that if his family is going through his research notes and collecting his things, if they find any of his current or past research that mentions his sources, I would hope that if it were me, my family would just turn it over to the publisher. And then when the sources are ready and they find somebody they're comfortable with, that they're familiar with, that maybe they've read their work and they think is credible, let the sources come to somebody. I mean, there's plenty of journalists out there waiting to get this information. Why do we have to take these sources and force them somewhere? Let the publisher have all the information. They, I would assume, would keep it confidential and quiet. Or, I mean, I guess you could just destroy it. But the bottom line is let the sources find somebody they're comfortable with. Because I think we've all been in that position where you're kind of pressured into talking to somebody that you're not really sure of or not really comfortable with. And that's when you hold things back, or that's when you maybe don't tell the exact truth. And I think that's part of the problem in the paranormal field and in the conspiracy theory field.
But the big question is, will those sources still want to talk?
If they don't, can we blame them?
You can't, but you can always be hopeful.
You can, and I think that there are plenty of writers out there that are of a decent quality that, and I think I've said this before, these sources may not come out tomorrow or next week or next month, but I think that if they're interested in telling their stories or giving up the information that they already have, they're looking for somebody that they're comfortable with or going to be comfortable with. They're already scouring and reading different authors and watching the field looking for that person. So when they find somebody that they're comfortable with and they want to tell their story or give up their information, I think then they will come forward. And I think to expect anything more from them is a little bit too much pressure, and in the long run could sort of deter other people from coming forward.
It could very well be, but the problem that we have in this field, and I brought up the example with John. Okay, when Tom Clancy passed away, Mark Greaney had already been writing with Tom Clancy and researching with Tom Clancy for a number of years. Somebody like Jim Mars didn't have that background author working with him in order to help build these stories. He was a lone wolf in this field. So it's easier for a guy like Mark Greaney to all of a sudden take over Tom Clancy's sources and references of information than it would be for somebody to all of a sudden try and step into Jim's information, his black book, or wherever he keeps his phone numbers, and start phoning up these people and say, by the way, this is what I'm doing now, this is who I am, can we talk? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, a lot of those sources, unfortunately, are going to disappear. And it's sad, because there's a heck of a lot more information out there than what we're going to hear.
I agree, but I think that to try and put somebody in Jim Mars's place and try and sort of caress those sources into revealing their information, I don't think that's fair to them. I think the field, both paranormal field and journalism field, need to kind of step back and let these people just sit for a little bit and maybe decide what direction or where they want to go with their information. If we try and do much more than that, I'm honestly afraid that these people will just kind of clam up and not want to talk.
That's a chance that we're going to have to take, in order to get that information out there. I hope these guys, whoever they are, I hope if I was signing up with Galaxy Publishing, I would very much hope that, they would try and convince the Mars family to allow us to get into that research so we could contact those sources ourselves to say, would you be interested in working with one of our new writers? We have vetted this person out. We feel he or she is very strong in this field, and go from there. What do you think?
But indirectly, isn't that essentially his family then giving up his sources? And I just don't think, with the integrity and credibility that Jim Mars had, I don't know that he would really be happy with that.
I understand that. And going to Canadian Joe on hashtag Spaced Out Radio on Twitter, he says, in my opinion, Jim Mars's sources should be kept confidential. His family shouldn't give them to a publisher or anyone else. So that really leads to what you're saying, which I can understand. And I can appreciate that. You know what I'm saying? I can totally appreciate that.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think everybody needs to be aware of now is there, in the next few months, may be some people coming forward saying they were a source of Jim Mars, that they have information that they were beginning to tell Jim Mars, and try and turn his demise or his death into an opportunity for them to spread what they believe or fake information or false information. That they may try and use him as a stepping stone now, and there's no way to say that they were not a source of his.
Mm-hmm.
Because for all we know, half of his sources may have just been in his head. I mean, you come from journalism. I've worked in journalism. We both know people who know things, but we may not have those names written down. And if I were to die and somebody came to, whether it be my wife or you or one of the places I've written for, and said that they were talking to me and they had this information, how do you vet that? How do you verify that?
I understand that, but every journalist, Everett, has a little black book that they hold on to and they guard with their lives. You know what I'm saying? That black book is out there.
Do you know I have a computer that crashed, and on that hard drive there is a ton of stuff. So I will not get rid of the computer, and I'm afraid to take the computer to a place to have it repaired because there are some sensitive things on there. So it's just sitting in a closet in my office until I get back to those projects and I can decide what I want to do with that hard drive.
I get you. And I will fully admit, a lot of my sources that I had when I left radio in 2007, that black book came with me. And I did not give out very many phone numbers to absolutely anybody. You know, like I did to a couple of people, but there were other reporters who hit me up for information, and I just said, yeah, no, I can't do that. I can't do that. That's not fair. You know, that's just the way it is. But there comes a time, this is a different scenario here. You know, we're talking about one of the leading conspiracy writers that was going. I'm really surprised that as a lot of these people are getting older, and we mentioned the names earlier, that there is nobody that we know of that is lined up to take over their research. It's scary because imagine how many sources we're going to lose.
Yeah, but some of them, I'm sure some of the bigger names, and Jim Marrs was one of the biggest of the names, but I'm sure that many of them have research assistants that are privy to the different sources and may have some limited contact with them. We don't know what's going to happen. And, you know, the fact is that these, like Jim Marrs' sources, maybe they're already in the process of finding somebody or have found somebody, and maybe in 6-8 months we're going to hear about a new book. The thing is, we may not even know that the new material that's coming out is from sources that were once Jim Marrs' sources. They may not even mention that. You know, maybe to the writer of the book or the author, but they may not want it public anymore.
I do understand that. I do appreciate that. You know, but the problem still lies, Everett. The problem still lies, as I mentioned to John. Right now, besides very, very few people, do we have very, very few researchers in their late 20s, 30s, and even into their early to mid 40s that are trying to take the ball and run with it as this first generation of researchers and writers starts to die off, retire. I hate to use those terms, but it is going to happen. It's inevitable. And we don't have anybody stepping up to the plate besides a few. He mentioned Erica Lukes. I think Ryan Sprague is a good one. You know, there's not many people stepping up because, as we said in the show with John, a lot of these younger generations are forming way too much opinion and not enough fact, and they're trying to pawn off their opinion as fact, and that's dangerous.
How much of that do you think is due, though, to this generation has kind of grown up on the sightings, unsolved mysteries, all the way to the ghost hunters, kind of little snippet stories in terms of journalism regarding the paranormal? I mean, so many of these people have, or basically the entire generation, most of them, that's what they know or how they learned to report on the paranormal. So how do, not to turn this into asking you a question, but how do we move this generation into the serious research?
That's a tough one. The first thing you have to do is you have to get rid of opinion. You have to get rid of opinion. You don't have a choice. Because until you get rid of opinion, you can't find fact. At least that's my opinion on that. No pun intended. Right? Honestly, but do you see it any other way? I mean, how many people have, and we've talked about this so much on this show, how many times have we heard researchers say, oh, I'm not looking into that woo-woo crap when it comes to Sasquatch or Dogman, or I'm not looking into extraterrestrials as being anything interdimensional. If it's not from the government about disclosure, I'm not doing anything with it. We hear it all where we're eliminating potential and theory before we've even researched it. And with so much of that going on, to me, that does not, even as a radio host, that does not allow a lot of conjecture to move forward.
Yeah, but at the same time, and you're right, we've talked about this forever. How do you fault somebody if they're interested in one aspect? How do you fault them for not wanting to investigate or look at another aspect of the paranormal?
Mm-hmm. I get that. I do get that, and I can appreciate that. I really can appreciate that. However, at what point, though, at what point do you say it's time to, smarten up a little bit? Let's get some people who are willing to do some quality research. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that is slowly beginning to happen. I've seen some interesting pieces out there in the last 6 months. Part of it is journalism students today, and even let's call them the millennials, they need to reopen their mind a little bit. And I'll tell you a quick story. When I first started listening to Spaced Out Radio, Bigfoot was the least interesting thing to me. And my view was honestly that it existed. It was not in the suburbs of Tulsa or wandering around somebody's backyard in Kansas. It was going to be found in the jungles of Cambodia where nobody's been for 100 years. But the more I look at different things and hear different stories and consider different ideas, I've switched to the idea. I'm not completely sold on it, but I'm open to the idea that Bigfoot could be so much more than what I originally thought it would be. And maybe that's because of my age, maybe that's our generation, but hopefully as these millennials and this new generation matures a little bit, they'll begin to see that and open up their minds, and then they can begin doing the serious, solid research that looks at everything like it needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope so.
The truth is, if you think about it, somebody in their 20s, when I was in my 20s, I wasn't completely closed-minded, but I kind of had tunnel vision on what I was going to do and what I wanted to do. And in a way, I can see that being the same for a journalist in their 20s. They want to write about this. They haven't taken that topic and maybe seen how it can go in this direction or that direction. They haven't had that experience yet. So I think we have to give them a little bit of time. And I think to sit here and say who's going to be the next Jim Mars so quickly is a little unfair. We have to give everybody a chance to step up.
Are there topics that we need to focus in on more, or maybe take a different look at from the topics that Jim was writing about?
I don't know. You read some of his stuff, and he explores the stuff so thoroughly, but there are, and I'd have to go back and look at some of his work, but there are things that he will say in some of his books where you kind of have to look at it and go, wow, that was a path somebody could go down. I mean, he was one of the forefront researchers on the Aurora, Texas UFO incident, I believe. And I saw some of his television work and read some of his work on it, and I'd love to see somebody take a serious look at where he left off with that. And I know that's tough because grave markers have disappeared. I believe the well has been covered up. But, I mean, that's one of those things that it would be really nice, and I think somebody could really establish themselves by taking his work and breaking it down and starting over and moving forward and like completing that investigation.
I hope so. I really hope so, because this new generation does have to step up a little bit. There are some big shoes to fill, but let me point this out in a different direction, Everett, just to see your thoughts on it. Do you think that we, as a fringe media, have dropped the ball as researchers / journalists and authors by not training the next crowd to come up?
Do you mean training in terms of the paranormal media?
Well, let's take a look at what Tom Clancy did with Mark Greaney. And other writers have done that as well. Yet in this field, we have not done that. We have not seen this older generation grasp onto somebody who is younger and say, look, son, or look, daughter, you're going to follow in my footsteps, so that way, if something ever happens to me, you keep the information rolling.
I think the problem with that in this field is that, let's face it, there's not a lot of money in the paranormal. People may think there is, but there's not. So a lot of these writers, even as popular as they may be and as many books as they may sell, they may not have the money to afford a research assistant or somebody to help them. And the people that are of the age that we're talking about are more interested in making money and furthering their career prospects and probably finishing college and paying off their student loan debts. So it's kind of tough to fault anybody for not being in that position, not being ready to step up by having worked with one of these, this older generation of authors.
I want to get your opinion on this comment, and then I may say something as well. Muji Boy at #SpacedOutRadio on Twitter says, calling them journalists or researchers is an actual insult to journalists. They value their feelings, not intellect.
I don't think it's an insult. I think if somebody is taking a topic, regardless of what that topic is, if they're taking it seriously and they are looking at it, and there's first of all, there's a difference between commentary and journalism. But if they're looking at it with a serious intent, I think it's completely fair to call them journalists, and I don't think that should hurt anybody's feelings.
I'll tell you what, we need more people with journalism degrees getting into this field. Okay? A long time ago, about a year ago, Ian Punnett said it right on this show. We need more journalists to take this field seriously in order to get that information. I look at it this way, and I could be completely wrong. My opinion only. If we had more journalists taking these topics seriously, we'd sure as hell have the answers that a lot of people are wishing for. Because the idea of the media has become skewed, especially in the United States. It's now filtering here into Canada, where we are afraid to go after the tough questions. We all want to take a side now as journalists. Journalism isn't about taking a side. It's about reporting the facts. Whether you're reporting on the paranormal, aliens, politics, sports, or what's happening in the local school board with your local newspaper. It's about reporting the facts down the middle. Too many journalists today, and I have had people tell me this, and yes, I've been out for a decade, but I still got a lot of friends in the media. They tell me today that almost all these new journalists or so-called journalists that are coming up don't want to report on things because it differs from their opinion. You know what? As a journalist, your opinion does not matter. And that's the problem with journalism today. It doesn't matter what you are covering. The fact is, your opinion as a journalist does not matter. It would be the same as if you're at a Major League Baseball game and pick two teams. Let's say the Minnesota Twins and California Angels are playing a ball game, and that umpire grew up a California Angels fan, or pardon me, Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. Okay? Fan. And so the Anaheim strike zone was 6 inches wider in the square than it was for the Minnesota pitchers. Is that fair? No. Umpires can't take a side. Journalists are supposed to be the umpire for the public. And the minute we have started taking the sides is where everything has gone all hell-bent for leather. That's why people are calling fake news. That's why people are calling BS on the media or cannot trust the media anymore. Because that is happening. Correct me if I'm wrong, Everett, but you can't sit here and say that people in this field are untrustworthy because of the topics they choose. I could name a dozen reporters between CNN, Fox, and whoever else that are not towing the line as proper journalists.
No, you're right. And I think if the paranormal field wants journalists to take the paranormal more seriously, the paranormal field needs to start taking itself more seriously. And it needs to begin calling out the people who make it look bad or who are out just for themselves and to put the spotlight on themselves. We can't sit here and say journalists need to take us more seriously when we have so many people out there who are not taking what they're doing seriously, whether it be they're posting something on Facebook or they're, showing a video. They've made a video where they're drinking while they're investigating, or they're making fun of a client, or they're making fun of a situation, or they're acting all scared like they're, actors in a horror movie. If we want journalists to take the paranormal seriously, we need to show them that we're taking it seriously.
Is it possible? Have we gone way too far to one side?
As a whole, I think we've gone too far to one side, and we need to give credit and highlight the groups and the people and the researchers and the investigators that are trying to move it back to the center. The problem is that what people like to see is, stupidity. They like to see somebody being goofy. They like to see an accident. They like to see somebody being scared. So when somebody posts something that is controversial or inflammatory or makes a show of themselves or the situation, people are just naturally going to pay more attention to that than they are to the person who's writing something that they've spent hours and hours researching in libraries and on the internet to write, because that's not as exciting as somebody going off on a rant or running out of a house scared or, pointing out a ghost that they didn't get on camera. That's always going to draw more attention, more viewers.
It's also the job of the hosts or the journalist to ask the right questions.
I've noticed a lot of journalists that I've seen do interviews that don't really ask any questions. They kind of let their guests begin to talk, and then they will just say things like, "Oh, tell me more about that," or "Really? What did you learn from that?" They don't seem to know how to ask questions. I mean, one of the things that you've been really forceful on, and it's taught me a lot, is the idea of letting the guest lead the interview, but you have to know what questions to ask, and you have to guide them with those questions. There are so many people out there that just seem to kind of let their guest ramble, and then they stick in, a word here or two there and kind of just nudge them along. They don't ask the questions that they could be asking, and they miss a lot of opportunity to get some real information or dig deeper into the story.
Let's get to some questions here. Tripp is saying, their opinion or the check signer's opinion, news being entertainment monopolized now is the problem. What do you think, Everett?
I would agree with that. I think I'm not going to go and say that, the corporations completely control things, but I do believe that everybody that works for them knows what way they lean and how to craft their story in a way to stay in good favor of their employer. Is that the politically correct way to phrase all of that?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But on the same time, and I will say who or where, but I've worked on projects where a publisher has said, write this and prove this. And I've declined those because right away they're forming the outcome of the story. They're taking their opinion and deciding that's what the story is going to prove. And that's, I can't do that. And I hope there are more journalists out there that can't do that. But it can be hard to walk away from, whether you're in it for the name recognition or the paycheck. When you're presented with that, it can be hard to walk away from that.
For sure. Money speaks. Money talks. I have been accused by people before around here because I make no bones about it. I'm trying to make a living off of this. And that's why I'm working hard, and I sacrifice my family's time, and my wife is very, very understanding about it. That we're trying to make a career and a business out of this. And when you sacrifice so much, whether you're trying to make it as a first-time writer, first-time broadcaster, whatever, you have to be able to pay the dues. Are there enough people out there who want to pay the dues?
I don't think anybody wants to pay the dues. They want their quick 15 minutes of Facebook Live fame.
I would agree.
And there's nothing wrong with making a business of this. There's nothing wrong with providing, again, this is different than ghost hunting. You are providing a platform for people to express their ideas and not exactly, it is, but it isn't, publicize their work. But you're providing a platform. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as it's an honest, open discussion that moves things forward. People can be critical of it, but it's not any different than any other product, except for the fact that it's maybe based on the paranormal.
Let's get to a question from Joe in the Spreaker chat room. He is asking, what's the difference then between a host, a radio host, and a journalist, and should they always be the same? Everett, you take it from a journalistic standpoint.
Well, as a host, you're dealing with a variety of different people and a variety of different topics. You can be a host and a journalist, but not really at the same time. And I learned that from you because one of the things that, you really instilled in a lot of people is the idea that when somebody comes on the show, it's their time. It's their story to tell. And you just guide them through their story. That's not journalism. that's being a host and letting the journalist do what they do. But that doesn't mean that in your off hours you couldn't be a journalist if you felt like researching a topic or, exploring something. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive in life, but I think that you have to put one hat on at a time.
I would agree with that. And the one thing that I will say as the host of a show, and I wish more hosts would do this, and I'm not saying that this way is the perfect way, but it works for what we do. And I'll use this example. If you're in a cockpit of an airplane, who's the pilot and who's the navigator? 90%, 95% of the people I ask that question to will say, it's my show, I'm the pilot. No, you're not. You are the navigator. You know what I'm saying? And the reason why you're the navigator is your job is to get the pilot, a.k.a. the guest, to where he needs to go. That's all you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's how you do it, how you ask the questions. Is there a little bit of journalism involved? Yes, but not much. Not much. It's more controlling the interview. That's all you're doing, is you're controlling and steering the interview with where you want to go. Where you put your journalistic hat on, if you're sitting on this end of the microphone, it's beforehand. It's when you're researching the topics. It's when you're booking a guest, figuring out what you're going to talk about that night. That's what it's all about. That's where the journalism comes into play. It's the phone calls. The funnest part for journalism with me is talking on the phone. My wife gets sick of it because I'm always on the phone. I was literally on the phone talking Spaced Out Radio today from about 11 o'clock in the morning when I touched base with you, Everett, until 5 o'clock this afternoon. That's where I did my business. That's where I did my journalism. Right? Coming to the show, it's easy to ask questions because you've already done the preliminary discussion with the guest. You know what you're talking about. You have what we call focus. You can only get that focus if you're a host, if you're in the navigation seat and letting the pilot, a.k.a. the guest, do their job and fly you where you need to go.
Exactly. And, that was the very first time you and I talked. You asked me that question about what is a show host? Is he or she the pilot or the navigator? And I answered it, and I answered it the same way that you view it. And you made a comment to me that you would be surprised, or I would be surprised at how many people would answer that, well, it's their show, they're the pilot. And I kind of thought, well, sure, whatever. But, through the year or so, we've had opportunities to talk to different people. And I've asked that question. I've heard you ask that question. And it is amazing how many people, whether they have just a tiny little show or they're doing Facebook Live or they have a big show, it's amazing how many of them actually say, well, it's my show, so I'm the pilot. And that astounds me.
Astounds me too, my friend. It does. But that's where the journalism comes in. Because for a lot of people, because they don't have that journalism training, they don't know what they're doing. It's easy to talk on a microphone, but there is styles in regards to it. Everybody has to develop their own style. Some are great, some are copycat, and some are just, shouldn't be on a microphone at all. I don't know where we stand on that. I'm not about to answer that question. Because I know me, I am my own worst critic when it comes to everything. But you try and be natural. You try and be organized. You try and be as authentic as you could be without stealing someone else's opinion, someone else's ideas, someone else's shtick, shall we say. You have to be authentic to yourself. And that'll come through to the audience.
You have to be genuine. And we had said, or we had talked about journalist versus host. While a host can't really be a journalist, that background can really help, because I've heard some hosts that obviously don't have any kind of background in journalism, and they have a guest, and that guest will say something, and as a journalist, I have like 5 questions pop into my head right away, and these hosts just kind of go on, let the guest tell their story, and they miss so many opportunities to, take 5 seconds and ask a question and get so much information, so much entertainment, take the story in a completely unexpected direction, all because I'm assuming, it's my opinion, that they don't have enough of a journalist background or a journalism background to catch that one little thing that they could pursue in that interview.
You can only hope. You can only hope. Would you disagree?
No. Hopefully people start stepping up, and hopefully, as I don't know. There's so much out there that is of a lower quality that I don't know that in terms of podcast and radio and the Facebook Live stuff, it's hard to see it all. It's hard to monitor it all. But a lot of what I've seen, the people are so intent on making it about them that they miss those opportunities. Hopefully that changes.
Somebody in the Revolution Radio chat room right now is taunting someone to say the word gnomes on the air.
You
Buddha,
just did.
I know that. Buddha, I know it's you. I know the game you are playing right now. I don't like it. And I'm pointing my finger at my computer screen just like you can see it right now, but I know you can't. But my finger is pointed at you. I know what you were trying to do, and this is a gnome-free zone. A gnome-free zone. So you get that out of your head, man. Get that out of your head. That's not even kosher around these parts. Not even kosher. Sorry, had to get my rant in there.
One day I am going to find somebody up there who I can send a bunch of money to just to have them decorate your yard in gnomes overnight.
That's just pure evil. One day I hope somebody walks into your bedroom and cuts your hair.
Hey. That's just wrong.
I hear you. Let's get to a question from Shar. She says, how many guests are amazed and grateful of your interview style, Dave? Oh, goodness. I'm going to take an example. Nicole Strickland she was on a couple of weeks ago on a Friday talking about the Queen Mary. She actually sat down and penned a very long letter to me basically saying thank you. I would say most guests are very pleasantly surprised because what we try and do from the time we send out an interview request to the time we let them know a week before showtime to the day of the show where we call them a few hours before showtime to calling them exactly when they want, we try and make things as comfortable for the guests as possible. And I have a little speech that I give to every guest before they come on. And that speech is, we're not going to ask you a bunch of BS questions. We are going to give you the ball. And we are going to come at you with the highest of journalistic integrity. And that includes your audience questions. And I let them know that. And this is why I'm very fortunate that when the audience asks the questions, they know what's going to get in and what's going to get out. or what's not going to be allowed. So those snarky questions, and yes, I'm pointing at you guys on Twitter, even though I love them, keep them coming. But what I'm saying is, there are certain questions that I'm not going to ask. Okay, I had to edit a couple of questions last night because they were irrelevant to the conversation. It's not that they were bad questions from the audience, but they were irrelevant of where the topic was going. And you have to be able to show the guest that respect. They deserve that respect because they are giving you their time. Now, respect coming back, I won't have a guest on that says, well, you didn't read my book? Yeah, I'm not going to be coming on your show if you didn't read my book. It's not my job to sell your book. It's your job to sell your book to get my audience to buy it off of you. Right? And that's the truth. Others may disagree with me, but that's the way I look at it. I'll promote the hell out of your book if you're an author. You sell it to my audience. There's 140,000 people that I've just given you the time to. You sell your goods. Whether it's a book, whether it's your information, whether it's your research, whether it's your knowledge or your professionalism or whatever it is. We give you the forum. And what we try and do is we try and give that respect to absolutely everyone, whether they are an experiencer who is talking about their experiences for the first time publicly, and we've had that happen on this show, or whether it's someone who has been doing the media circuit for the last 30 years on these topics. Everybody gets treated the same. And I think that's what wins a lot of people over, saying, wow, I've never had that before. I have had guests come up to me and say, you've ruined me for other shows. Because I've been on other shows, never been treated like this before, and I don't know if I'm going to do those other shows now because you spoiled me.
Well, I think you're being a little humble, because I would say that it's probably at least once or twice a week where, and sometimes more than that, but at least once or twice a week where one of the guests just glows and gushes with the way that you've everything from handled, the pre-interview stages to the questions to the interview in general to, they compliment the audience. They love, and not to sound like a love fest, but they love the way it's handled, and it's different than so many of the other things. And the thing is that some of these people are going on shows, and they're not entirely sure what show they're going on to, and they get into the interview and realize that maybe it's, not the most professionally run outfit. And they're kind of blindsided, where you stay in constant contact with them and handle it well. And that gets you and gets us a lot of respect. And it shows all of the guests that you're taking it seriously. And that's an important step in trying to bring this into the mainstream.
You know what I will say? I did try, I will admit this, I did try that whole thing about getting the guest to write down 5 questions. What do you want me to ask you? I stopped that. Couldn't handle it. To me, it seemed so wrong. The questions are genuine. The questions are from our fans as well in the chat rooms and on Twitter. Everett, thank you so much for doing this, my friend.
It was great to be here.
You hold on, my friend. I'm going to wrap this thing up pretty darn quick here because we're one day away from the weekend, people. Some of you have already started, if you're in Australia especially. Then you're only hours away from Saturday. I want to say thank you to John Goodwin for being our guest for the first 2 hours, talking about the life and times of the late Jim Marrs. John is from Galaxy Publishing, runs that company. It's great for him to come on and share the experiences with Jim that he had in his life. Tomorrow night on the program, the SOR Roundtable. I'm bringing in some friends. We're going to all ask 3 questions. Don't know where it's going. Don't know where it's going to take us. but it's going to be fun. I hope you take the time to join us as well. 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern Time at spacedoutradio.com. I want to say thank you to my great team who helps me put this piece of business that we call SOR together. Everett Themer, as you just heard, and Eric Markham from the Encounter Online. Tim Doyle and Jolene Lammers, our web designers. Social media, Catherine James. Our great announcer, Grandpa Bob Davis. Yes, he became a grandfather last night. Our Director of Business Management, Kim Gandy. And our media company, Leslie Mitchell-Clark's LMC Media out of Toronto, taking care of us as well. But the biggest thanks comes to all of you, those who are snarking in the Twitterverse, those taking part in the chat rooms, and those who are just hanging out at home. Without all of you guys making this fun, sharing our tweets, spreading it around social media, telling a friend, we could not be coming bigger and better every night that we are. Because together, my friends, we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, take us home. We'll talk to you in 21 hours from now. Have a good one, peeps. Love you.